A warmer brotherly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family podcast. We've got a great podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, it is Mr. Blake Lovell. He does tremendous work over at Southeastern 14, and he's going to be joining me to give a little bit of thoughts as to what we all saw in the SEC versus ACC challenge from a little bit more of an SEC lens. We'll be diving in as to some of the surprise teams in the conference thus far. We certainly need to talk about what we've seen out of Kentucky this year. That has been absolutely tremendous with the way that they've cranked it up tempo. We'll talk about if that is going to be sustainable moving forward for them, and we're going to take a look at some games that we want to watch for this weekend with regards to the SEC as well, especially that Ole Miss versus Memphis game. So getting a nice SEC roundup in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @unit_D1. Keep in mind letters EM. Name does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. Dove into a few yesterday, so always happy to answer those and always happy to enlighten you guys a little bit. If there's something that you don't understand, please do not be a stranger. If I haven't answered it already on the podcast, I'll answer for you. If I have already answered it on the podcast, well, I will refer you to when I did answer it on the podcast. So we've got you guys all covered there, and let's take a look back at everything that we saw late Wednesday into Thursday in college basketball. Since the Greg Peterson experience, that is from midnight to 3 Eastern time, I do have to do these recaps more around about 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, and had some interesting basketball towards the back half of Wednesday and into Thursday. So let's recap it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
In terms of a late Pac-12 game, you did see USC completely house Eastern Washington 106-78, big-time statement from USC. They go 12 of 24 from 3, and it's not easy to win by 28 points against a team that shoots 13 of 34 from 3 like Eastern Washington did. Jake Hyman, who he began his career at UCLA, actually had 26 big points for Eastern Washington, but man, Boogie Ellis, 8 of 10 from three-point range. Vincent Iwuchukwu off the bench, he was able to log 13 points himself. Just an absolutely tremendous showing there. And then you did see, with regards to our DK network write-up, that got through with Arkansas controlling that game against Duke. I was doing this podcast as the first half had just wrapped up with Arkansas leading by a point, and they came through 80-75. Duke actually did make a nice effort towards the back half of the game, but it was Kaleef Battle with his 21 points, 5 boards, 5 assists that really won the day for Arkansas. Duke, to their credit, they actually won the turnover battle by a count of 12-8, but for Arkansas, they do a good job on the boards. Trayvon Brazile, one of the more underrated players in college basketball, 19 points at 11 boards, and Chandler Lawson, how about 6 blocks and 8 rebounds, only scored 7 points, but this Arkansas team got after it down low, and Kyle Filipowski, he still got his with 26 points, 10 rebounds, but Arkansas, how about 10 block shots for them to be able to get that one through. And then you did see Georgia be able to go on the road. They knock off Florida State 68-66. We'll certainly dive into more of the SEC results from the SEC Big 12 Challenge, including Auburn getting the job done against Virginia Tech as well. But for Georgia, they were down big in this game. They were only down 4 at the half, but Florida State had about a 17-point lead with less than 8 minutes remaining. It looked like they were just going to be able to take this game, run with it. Heck, for Florida State, I believe that they were up by 13 points with about 5.5 minutes remaining. And then for Georgia, they claw all the way back. For Georgia, it was all about what you were able to get out of the young freshman in Silas Demery Jr. He comes up with 15 big points in this game. He was scoring a lot late. For Florida State, they did have Darren Green working 21 points. He went 4 of 8 from three-point range. And for Florida State, they actually win the turnover battle. They win the rebound battle. But for Georgia, off the bench, MJ Melendez, 12 points, 11 rebounds. Florida State unable to hold up down low. And for Florida State overall, they shoot 34.5% from the floor. So, able to get the job done. And then in terms of what we saw from Thursday, right now our DK Network write-up pick that was on the under in Utah versus Hawaii. Right now not in the world's greatest shape. I took under 145.5 with the write-up. Currently 73 points have been scored in the first half, so we'll need a little bit of a lower scoring second half there, and we'll certainly recap that on the podcast tomorrow. And this game just went to halftime, but looks like it's going to be a housing from Creighton unless if we see a big second half from Oklahoma State, 47-29. Creighton coming off of a rough game that they played against Colorado State in their multi-team event last week. But for Creighton, right now they're 7 of 12 from three-point range. It's been all about Steve Ashworth and Ryan Kunkbreder combining for 26 points in the first half. You've had Trey Alexander chip in their 9 points. For Creighton, they're winning the rebound battle 21-11. And for Oklahoma State, they actually only turned the ball over 3 times in this game, but the Creighton defense has really gotten after it, and feels like Creighton has used their bench a little bit more in this game rather than the final few games of that multi-team event, which I think is a very, very good thing for Creighton. I do think that if they can go to that bench a little bit more, they're going to be rock solid. And speaking of rock solid, how about how rock solid Florida Atlantic was in this one? Other than that loss that they took against Bryant, this Florida Atlantic team has been getting the job done. 83-58 the final. As for Florida Atlantic, they have covered all but one of their games this far this season. The long one that they did not cover was that clunker that they threw up there against Bryant. That Butler game as well, that was one that was a little bit interesting on the point spread. So they failed to cover 2 games. So I do amend myself because I do think that opener against Butler was more around 5, and then they didn't cover the closing number. But that said, for Florida Atlantic, 7-14 from three-point range. Elijah Martin, 20 points. He was tremendous in this one. And for Liberty, they play slow, they play control, but they don't do necessarily the world's greatest job on the glass from time to time. They prevent second chances typically, but they don't get a lot of them themselves. For Liberty, they lose battle on the glass 39-29. You did have for Liberty 16 big points out of Colin Porter, but past that, they weren't able to get anything going against a Florida Atlantic defense that a lot of people forget. It was a top 40 unit in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. Vladislav Golden, 7 boards, 2 blocks, and 18 points. So total domination from FAU. And then this Butler offense. How about what we're seeing out of it? 103-95. They get it done in overtime against Texas Tech. A good Texas Tech defense and a Texas Tech team that got an unreal shooting night from Chance McMillan off the bench. He went 8 of 10 from 3 for 24 points. You were able to have Pop Isaacs and Joe Toussaint combined for 16 assists and 36 points of their own. For Texas Tech, just 7 turnovers in a game that went to overtime. Butler lost that battle, but where Butler won was on the glass. How about 40-24 with Posh Alexander, a triple-double, 10 points, 10 rebounds, 11 assists. You could tell that he was not himself last season when he had to play alongside Andre Curbelo. Now he's away from Andre Curbelo. He and Butler starting to cook again, and Jamal Telford, DJ Turn It Up Davis, a combined 51 points, and Butler, they also won this game at the free throw line. 19 of 25 of the charity stripe with Davis, going 10 of 10 on his freebies. That was absolutely massive. What else was pretty massive was East Carolina's a little bit of a home underdog, getting it done outright against UNC Wilmington. 74-66 Wilmington. It's been one of your better cover teams in all of college basketball, but this is an East Carolina team that early on during the season they were dealing with Brandon Johnson being out due to illness. Looks like he's back and looks like he's back to being his normal self. 18 points, 11 boards. He went 4 of 8 from three-point range, and for UNCW, they got 3 of 23 from three-point range. So I mean, pretty remarkable that they were able to hold in this game. Terzarian White double-double, 14 points, 11 rebounds, but not a great effort there. Very good effort from Minnesota, though. I wasn't sure why they were only about a 12 to 12.5 point favorite against New Orleans, and they completely house the Privateers. 97-64 for New Orleans. They go 1 of 11 from 3, and for Minnesota, you had 20 points off the bench from Cam Christie. Mike Mitchell, the transfer from Pepperdine, he chips in their 14 points for Minnesota. They did a very solid job on the glass, winning that battle 44-29, and they were able to do this without necessarily getting the world's greatest effort from Dawson Garcia. He had 15 points, but there were so many other guys that they were able to just fill in for him. Dawson Garcia only had to play 18 minutes in this one because the game got completely out of hand, and the team was able to just completely boat race New Orleans. And then how about Coppin State, a team that was just ghastly with their offense coming into this game. For Coppin State, against D1 competition, they had not broken the 62-point plateau all season long. They get to 89 against UMBC, which I think that says a lot about the UMBC defense. 89-70 to the final, as you had 37 points and 13 rebounds out of Justin Winston, who was leading the team with 9.3 points per contest. So nobody deserves to lose them all, and that was the case here. And we saw UIC enter into the night on Thursday, one of the few undefeated teams in college basketball against the spread. They had covered all games. Well, they do not cover this one, as UIC actually gets out to a really good start as well. They were up 36-25 late in the first half, but Illinois State, they complete the comeback trail, 69-64 the final for Illinois State. it was key that they had Darius Burford and Dalton Bakes playing tandem in the backcourt. They combined 39 points out of these two gentlemen, and for Illinois State, they didn't do a good job of taking care of the ball. They lose the turnover battle 19-14, but they made the most out of their shots. They go 25 of 43 from the floor and 16 of 24 at the charity stripe for UIC, just 7 of 15 at the free throw line, and this is a UIC team that they're a little bit shaky with regards to their overall shooting, so something to certainly be mindful of there. And for North Alabama, they were able to take it to Tennessee Tech as well, 86-71. So lots of interesting games are going down in college basketball. Not necessarily the most rambunctious night on Thursday, but certainly had some fun ones with Arkansas Pine Bluff also being able to get the cover against Oklahoma. This is just going final. Looks like Pine Bluff is going to lose this one by 23. Final 45 seconds. They are down 105-82 against Oklahoma. And Oklahoma team is really starting to put the ball in the basket a little bit more. That's another over in college basketball. And if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, darn near 55% of games have gone over the total, as right now we are staring at with some results pending from Thursday. 164 overs and 136 unders. And over the last 7 days, we really have seen favorites dry up in terms of an against the spread record. Favorites against the spread the last 7 days, 134 and 166. Overall for the season, it's really balanced out in terms of favorites and underdogs. Favorites are hitting at 50.3%, 559, 553, and 16 against the spread. Meanwhile, if you take a look at the overs for the season, still hitting at a little bit north of 52%, 583 overs to 536 unders. I believe we have now had 10 pushes along the way as well. So it has been really remarkable to take a look at, and that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now. What else is remarkable to take a look at is the SEC. A man that does such a tremendous job of it is Blake Lovell. He does incredible work over at Southeastern 14, and coming up next, we're going to get his reaction to what we saw in the SEC-ACC Challenge, just a lay of the land in the SEC. Certainly going to be talking about Kentucky and some games to watch this weekend. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Houston Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
We're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Houston Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man, Blake Lovell. He does absolutely tremendous work over at Southeastern 14, in which he takes a look at all things college basketball. I know that the name is SEC 14, but you guys heard him in the offseason breaking down such conferences as the Horizon League, the SoCon, the Atlantic Sun. This guy just knows a little bit of everything about all these college basketball teams based out there in lovely Nashville, Tennessee. And to be able to follow Blake on Twitter, that is easy enough, at the Blake Lovell altogether, or if you prefer to follow him on X as well, both work. And Blake, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, I always enjoy it, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining me, Blake. And it has been an interesting last few days because we just wrapped up the interesting event between the ACC and the SEC. Typically used to be the ACC versus Big Ten Challenge. This year it was the SEC versus ACC Challenge. But what were your big takeaways from this one? Because I do think that there were a lot of people that were anticipating the SEC to run roughshod through it. And the SEC, in my opinion, had a relatively good showing. But at the same time, I think that it's very clear in terms of the SEC, there's really a divide between the haves and the have-nots in this conference.
Yeah, I do think it's pretty clear, Greg, and I think you kind of had sort of, I think, a theme that we've seen in the SEC in recent years, even though it has been a conference that obviously has gotten stronger and, you know, is getting a lot more teams into the NCAA tournament than it used to. I feel like there's been a trend, though, in the past several seasons where you feel like there's a lot of teams that leave some good opportunities on the table, especially in the non-conference. And, you know, I feel like we've seen that already. You know, whether it's a Tennessee, right, who goes, you know, to the Maui Invitational, has two really good opportunities, can't capitalize on either one of them. And then turn around in a third straight game. You've already played Purdue and Kansas. Now you got to go to North Carolina. And you give up 61 points in the first half and you lose that game, but giving up 100 overall. And, you know, we just didn't really expect that based on how the game would play out. But then, you know, it's the teams that have maybe struggled a little bit out of the gate, like in Arkansas, they wind up, getting their biggest win of the season by beating Duke. And it's been kind of a mixed bag so far, I think, for the SEC. But like you said, I think there's a pretty clear divide of who those top tier teams are. And, kind of like I said to someone earlier, yes, you have a Tennessee lose that game to Carolina. That's a big type game. You have an A&M. Feels like they left one on the table against Virginia. Games like that, but really, I think when you compare those teams still to a lot of other teams in the SEC, at full strength, both of those teams are probably still, top 4, 5 teams in the league. And so it's going to be interesting to see how all these other teams continue to kind of build off of this. You know this by like just breaking down all these different games, but it feels like there are so many SEC teams that are not at full strength. They're all missing guys. And it's kind of impacted, I think, the consistency we've seen from this league.
Yeah, it really has made a big impact. And one of those teams that is currently not playing at full strength is one that has really dazzled thus far. And I think we need to get into it. As Blake Lovell, who does tremendous work over at Southeastern 14, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I need to get your thoughts on Kentucky, because when I saw that foreign tour that they did over the summer, I thought they were going to play a little bit more up-tempo. I thought they were going to shoot a few more threes. I wasn't expecting quite what we have seen thus far from Kentucky, as they just put up a big, giant number on Miami, being able to get past 90 points once again. The 118 against Marshall. Granted, it's a very up-tempo Marshall team. That was something to behold as well, but this is a Kentucky team that all of a sudden has been able to get to at least 81 points thus far this season. What have been your overall takeaways for Kentucky? Because I thought it was going to take a lot longer for the team to gel than it has. And as I mentioned, it's a team that still is without Aaron Bradshaw.
It kind of, I feel like, led into a segue there, Greg, because I knew Kentucky was coming, and I was like, they kind of need to be their own conversation, because when you compare them to everyone else, probably in this conference right now, you're asking me right now, who's the team with the highest upside? It's Kentucky. Again, that kind of ties into the fact that we do see a lot of these teams that are not at full strength yet, and it's hurting some of these teams more than others. Kentucky, it looked like they're about to get Bradshaw back, getting closer to full strength, and yet they're still playing at such a high level. Like you mentioned, the point production they put out just pretty much all season at this point, but especially when you consider what they did to Miami and just seeing the trend now, how they're shooting the ball. I don't know that they finished the year shooting 42.6% from three, but it is clear that with the roster they've compiled and the way these guys are playing together so far, they're getting better shots. They're getting more open shots. And I think that was the thing. And I can remember this vividly, Greg. We talked about it going into the season when we talked about Kentucky. Cal's thing was he's going to let them, I don't even know what the word is, but basically he was going to let them sort of dictate the offense. He was going to let them take more threes if they needed to. Let the players sort of dictate how they played on the offensive end, where I feel like for a lot of years, we talked about the frustration. It felt like they were sort of boxed in. There wasn't a whole lot going on with their offense. It was one guy doing this, 4 other guys standing around. It's not the case. Like, this team is getting other guys open shots. They're very unselfish. I mean, look at the assist numbers for this Kentucky team. It is remarkable what they're doing right now, whether it's Reed Shepherd, who looks like one of the most important players in the entire conference, one of the most important players in the country based on how he's playing so far, the rest of that freshman group. But it's also, having an Antonio Reeves, the importance of getting a Trey Mitchell. This feels like a pretty complete team to this point. They still got some things they probably need to work out on the defensive end. I think that's where getting a Bradshaw, a 7-foot guy into the mix, that helps a lot of those areas too. So Kentucky has looked really good so far, still got some interesting games. Obviously, the North Carolina one stands out on the non-conference schedule before they get into SEC play, but I think it's very clear that this feels like a different team for Cal.
Yes, it certainly does feel like a different team. Typically, this is a more mid-tempo team. Now they're really starting to speed it up, and man, it has been quite the sight to behold. We shall see if this maintains as the competition gets stiffer and stiffer, but they had a big step-up game against Miami, granted at home, but that's a big step-up game, and they made a massive statement. As joining me on the show, we do have Blake Lovell, who does amazing work over at Southeastern 14, and he is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And with regards to the SEC, has there been a team or two thus far that has surprised you either to the positive or the negative? I've got my negative in mind, and I'm sure that you have them in mind as well. We're looking at that team that went to Chapel Hill and didn't necessarily do so well. But what have been really your surprise teams from the SEC thus far? Because it has been very interesting to see how everything has played out.
Yeah, I guess we could start with the negative to get those out of the way. I mean, like you said, I think it is disappointing for Tennessee to have lost these 3 straight games, knowing these are the kind of teams you're going to play if you're getting deep into the NCAA tournament. If you're trying to make a run, you're going to have to play Purdue. You're going to have to play at Kansas and North Carolina, those type of teams, all the way from home. Now, maybe it's not a true road setting like it was at Carolina, but I think you wanted to see that early on. But of course, we can also say too, there's still a long way to go. Tennessee's been a little banged up too. We've seen that with multiple guys to this point. Awaka doesn't play in that North Carolina game. DeLeon, good freshman, I think. He doesn't play in that game. And that, leaves with the injury. So, yes, I think Tennessee just not getting any of those wins, pretty disappointing to this point. Elsewhere, look, I think you could certainly pick apart some of these losses we've seen. I think Alabama, losing to a Clemson, they're still doing fine at 5-2, but that felt like one that you wanted to see Alabama win. Their defense is what it is at this point, right? They're another team like Kentucky. They can score against anybody, it feels like, but defensively, they're different than Kentucky because they are just not playing at a very high level right now. So I'd love to see Alabama be a little more consistent on the defensive side. Elsewhere, look, there's teams like Vanderbilt who still hasn't played at full strength. LSU's been disappointing with how they've lost some of these games, but I don't know that we had that high of expectations for those kind of teams. On the positive side, Greg, again, I think it's like you said a minute ago, you have to start with Kentucky and how far they are already and thinking about what they could be in the future. And there are some other teams you can choose from here, but I'm just going to go with the one that I feel like I was pretty much set on this team being the worst team in the SEC heading into the season. And the South Carolina Gamecocks are 6-0 to this point. I know they haven't played the toughest schedule, but when you watch South Carolina play, they're beating teams that you feel like if this is going to be the spot that they take a step forward as a program, they need to beat these kind of teams. And they've beaten all of them to this point, whether it's Virginia Tech, Grand Canyon. I know Notre Dame's rebuilding. DePaul. Those are teams that are struggling right now. They should beat those teams, and they did. I really like kind of that group of 4 in the starting lineup and really what they're bringing to the table. You've got a Jacoby Wright there, too, who's helping kind of as the first man off the bench. I think the South Carolina team is very interesting. I'm not saying they're going to wind up being a tournament team. I think as the schedule gets tougher, it's one to watch. They got a big game against Clemson next Wednesday on the road. But I think there's like a toughness and sort of a swagger to this team that I wouldn't be shocked if South Carolina winds up winning way more games in the SEC than people expected, because I think there was kind of a consensus going into, this season from a lot of people. Hey, if they're not 14, they're 13. Right now, they maybe look more like an 8 or 9 type team in the SEC.
Yeah, they really have been able to rise up, and I'm right there with you. Man, I thought that South Carolina was going to stink, and I'm not bought in on them being a top 25 team to this point. I do think that they need to play a little bit more competition, but with every passing test, they've been able to improve more and more. And another team that has really surprised me, and they're going to have a big test on Saturday. This, in my opinion, is really where the rubber is going to meet the road. How about Ole Miss starting out 6-0, and they knock off NC State in very convincing fashion. It looks like Musa Cisse just got cleared to play for Ole Miss as well, so reinforcements are on the way for this team. What do you make out of this Ole Miss team that going into the season, I felt like we were both in agreement that this was the biggest team of mystery in the SEC, and even without Cisse to this point, they have really looked good.
They have for sure, and I think it's just going to be so fascinating now that you add him to the mix, again, considering what he brings to the table. And the defensive side, we know that's what Chris Beard loves to coach to. He loves to coach to the defense, and it seems fitting that he finally gets cleared. And again, Greg, that's a conversation for another day in terms of why guys are just now getting cleared 6 games into the season. It is one of those now where you look at this and think about they've not been great really on either side of the floor so far. Like, they're not a great offensive team. They're not a great defensive team. They've had to grind their way to some of these wins. 3 of their wins are by 3 points or less against teams that you feel like, should have had a little more separation with those teams. And then they come out and beat an NC State by 20. I think it's the combination of, again, knowing this is how a Chris Beard coach team is going to work. It could be sloppy offensively this season. Alan Flanagan's taken a huge step forward. He looks like the old Alan Flanagan that we talked about when he was at Auburn, when he wasn't having to battle through the injuries and all that. This guy looks the part now. And then, of course, you've got Morrell there who can score. You've got Jamin Brakefield who can score. You've got some other guys that are stepping up at times. But now, you are getting that opportunity to look at this team and think, okay, they're going to be able to pair a Jamarian Sharp who's going to block probably 2 or 3 shots a game. You bring in Cisse to the mix. You have your limitations offensively, and you're probably going to have them this season when you start to play better competition. Like, you're probably not going to be able to win a lot of games where you have to score 80. But they're probably not going to be a lot of games where they give up 80 either, because they are that good, I think, on the defensive side. Not yet, but they can be. And so, this Ole Miss team looks a lot more intriguing now because, like you said, think about the difference in how we view this team if they were to lose that game against Detroit Mercy or were to lose that game, against Sam Houston State. Games like that we've seen other SEC teams drop so far. We've seen, a Vanderbilt lose to a Presbyterian. We've seen a Missouri lose to a Jackson State. And some of these other games like that to this point. Arkansas loses at home, that game to Wilmington. So Greg, it's one of those things that I think you look at and really wonder, okay, can this Ole Miss team be kind of the sleeper team? And I said Wilmington, by the way, with Arkansas, they're the Greensboro. But I think Ole Miss is very intriguing all of a sudden because now you add Cisse to the mix, and that adds another dynamic to a coach that really loves defense.
Oh, absolutely. As we know with Chris Beard, that is his hallmark. We saw that with Texas, and immediately when he was out of the fold at Texas, we did see them crank up that tempo a little bit more as well. So I always take a look at Chris Beard, and I know that his teams are going to play tough defense. We shall see if the offense is able to come along for the ride, as well as Blake Lovell, who does amazing work over at Southeastern 14, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Blake, we've got a lot of good games that are coming up for this weekend. I mentioned one of them with that Ole Miss versus Memphis game. I think that is going to be one of the biggest ones, and that's going to be one of the most important ones for the SEC this weekend. And I know you had just mistakenly mentioned UNC Wilmington. They actually will be going up against Kentucky on Saturday. So you just had that game on the mind. And, hey, UNC Wilmington is a very good team as well. But in terms of what you're watching for this weekend in the SEC, pretty much Fridays through Sunday, is there any game other than Ole Miss versus Memphis that does pique your interest? Because I do think that it is a very interesting week for the SEC / into Monday as well, because I know that Arkansas versus Furman game should be a lot of fun. I don't know if it'll be competitive, but I'm sure there will be a lot of points in that game.
Yeah, I do think that will be the case probably with that one. Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting kind of sneaky good games probably on the schedule, whether it's looking at a Missouri, Wichita State, which I think that one's interesting just from Missouri's standpoint. We just saw them get the road win at Pitt, which I thought was a pretty, sneaky good win for Missouri to go on the road and get that, because remember that, like I said, this is a team who lost that home game to Jackson State. They really needed to kind of regroup, and they have over these past several games. I think that's kind of an interesting one. I mean, I know this isn't the Wichita State of many years ago, but it's still a team that is playing good defense, and they're only lost to this points against Liberty. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one that you circle. That's very interesting on Sunday. Even in Auburn, right, going on the road to play Appalachian State. Like, that's just one of those games where you're like, oh yeah, like that's actually going to be a game where Auburn is having to go on the road and play, that team. And so I think anytime you have those kind of games where you're going on the road and playing those kind of games, I think that one always sets up to be an interesting dynamic. And like you said a minute ago, I really think it's just seeing what Kentucky continues to do. Like, Kentucky to me feels like must-see TV at this point, no matter who they're playing, just because it's so fun to watch this group right now and to really see, can they just continue to expand off of what they're doing? And again, like we said, Aaron Bradshaw's status, does he come back? He's ready to go for that game, whether he is or isn't on the floor. I mean, this is, again, a Kentucky team that's so entertaining. I'd watch them play just about anybody right now.
Oh, they certainly are entertaining to take a look at. And on top of that, this is a little bit moving forward, but that Monday Arkansas State versus Alabama game, the over-under on that game should probably be set at about 175, and I might still be willing to take a look at the over in that game. I mean, my goodness, Arkansas State playing no defense at all, and with Alabama, we see how they're able to score in a flash, and a man that is always putting up great points, a man that does absolutely amazing work. Taking a look at this game that we all know and love, that'd be you, Blake. I know you do an absolutely amazing job over at the Field of 68 and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Always appreciate it, Greg. Like you said, we're covering so much now with SEC basketball into the fold over at Southeastern 14. Of course, wrapping up SEC football and bowl season, all that coming up. But yeah, the basketball stuff going pretty much every day, looking at all these different teams from these different angles. So you can find it on YouTube, Southeastern 14. You can find us there, and everything else, you can follow me on Twitter /X at the Blake Lovell.
Blake does such an amazing job taking a look at this game of college basketball every single time he joins this podcast. I feel like we get just a little bit smarter, and it's always great to have his insight. So a big thanks to Blake for joining me right here on Coast to Coast. It's now part of the Visa Family Podcast, and coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots. We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Visa Family Podcast, and It's always great to be joined by Blake Lovell. He does amazing work over at Southeastern 14, taking a look at this great game. I know that the name is SEC 14, which I'm sure that that'll be changed after this season, but he does much more than that. He does such a great job taking a look at the national landscape of college basketball. Certainly, we've got a lot of big games that are going down just all across college basketball, whether it be the Big East versus Big 12 Challenge. The SEC has some big ones coming up in the next few days and so much more, and Blake does a great job of breaking it all down. Big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_D1, and we're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is pretty much time order with regards to the bigger conferences, and then the smaller conferences, which we only have a few for today. The MEC, the MEAC, the Southland, I believe that we're able to throw in there. Also the America East. Those are going to be games that are at the bottom. If I didn't say America East as well, but everything else pretty much in time order from there. So let's get things started with a 41, a 42 on the betting board. St. Thomas is on the road facing off against Western Michigan. Western Michigan, a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite, totals between 133 and 133.5. I said St. Thomas as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. Fully recognize that last time I backed St. Thomas, I did a write-up on them against UW Green Bay, and they were as cold as an igloo in that game, but his St. Thomas team does such a good job with their offensive efficiency. In their 2 years at the Division I level, they have been a top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis, even with that clunker against UW Green Bay. So for the season, they're throwing it in there at a 37% clip from three-point range, and they've been able to get quite a bit of production out of their sophomore Kendall Blue. He's a 6'6" combo player that currently shooting 55% from three-point range. That'll see a little bit of a fall off, but love the 9 points per game that he's been able to throw in there. Couple that with the fact that got a pair of guys that are giving you about 5 rebounds per game. Parker Jorklin, Bennett, Kowinski. They are going to need to match up down low against a Western Michigan team in which their forte is down low. Anthony Crump has been able to give you 6 rebounds per game. You always get good production with in the neighborhood of about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game out of Titus Wright as well. But that said, you take a look at B. Artis Way and the fact that he just continues to be in and out of the fold, and that's what's killing this backcourt for Western Michigan. Now, it looks like he should be good to go in this one, but in 2 out of the last 3 games that he's played in, he has really just not been able to contribute too much, less than 15 minutes in 2 out of those 3. He's given you a combined 13 points in his last 3 contests, and this team was really relying upon him coming back from injury. During the 2020-21 campaign, he was able to log about 14.5 points per game. Hasn't been right ever since then. Despite that, you do have a Western Michigan team that's shooting 39.5% from 3, which I'm sorry, that is going to take a fall off. Last year, they were 33% three-point shooting team, and they lost their top 3-point shooters from a season ago, though. I do like what I'm seeing out of Seth Hubbard. He has come in and given the team 17 points per contest after last year. He did shoot about 42.5% from 3, 7.5 points per game. He's kicked up the volume. He's been able to do a relatively solid job, but with this Western Michigan team, they do get a little bit more loose with the ball because they are really looking for the international man of mystery, Jefferson De La Cruz Barango, to be able to help out with the facilitation. He's been able to give you about 4 assists per contest, and that was a fun name to say, but 15 turnovers per game for this team compared to the 10 of St. Thomas, I think is going to be a big bugaboo. And for St. Thomas, they always get their slow and controlled style since coming up to the D1 level. They every single year have been outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. They're back in the bottom 40 thus far this season, so I think that this is a slow and controlled game that St. Thomas is going to be more efficient in. I did set St. Thomas as a 2-point favorite, taking them out right on the money line, and with regards to the total, set mine at a 128, so diving in on the under. Now we get the DK Network right pick. This is 843, 844 on the betting board. Liberty is going to be taking on Charleston. This is a part of the fine field of 68 tip-off, with Liberty finding themselves between 7 and 7.5 point favorites, and total on this game is in the neighborhood of 146.5, and my write-up is going to be taking the points with Charleston. I'm not going to take them outright on the money line, but I felt like this should be a 2.5 point game. This is going to be a neutral court game, by the way, out there in Boca Raton, Florida. But Liberty is coming off of a game where yesterday they had to play against Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic ran them out of the gym in the first half, and for Liberty, I did feel like they got a little bit exposed. Their numbers going into the day yesterday were very good in terms of offensive efficiency, a top 25 team. They were shooting as collective 42.5% from three, which you just knew that there was going to be a little bit of a drop-off with that regard. And they're going up against a Charleston team that they're just doing for positivity in general. The Charleston team, through the first 4 games of the season, shot 21 of 117 from three-point range. Not to say that at the end of the year they're going to shoot like 40% from three or anything like that, but last season, this was about a 33% three-point shooting team, and they added a pair of guys, C.J. Fulton from the Patriot League, along with Frankie Policelli, who both shot in the neighborhood about 36-37% from three-point range at their respective schools the last 2 seasons to be able to elevate that. And with this Liberty team playing in a back-to-back, this is not the sort of opponent that you want to go up against in Charleston, that they are able to go 8+ deep. They don't play as much of a breakneck pace as they did in year number 1 under Pat Kelsey, but they're still a team that's in the top 125 in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got so many different weapons for the team. I was mentioning Frankie Policelli coming in from Stony Brook. He, Rain Smith, Enti Brazovic, Ben Burnham, all these guys are giving you between 9.2 and 11.7 points per game. Kobe Rogers has also been able to give you about 9.5 points per contest. These guys all really work in tandem. You don't necessarily have one guy that absolutely dominates the glass, but 4 of your top 5 scorers giving you at least 4.3 rebounds per game, much in the way that Liberty, with their pack line defense, they work as a collective where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. In most cases, Jarius McGee was able to go into takeover mode a little bit for Liberty the last season or two, but you've got a Charleston system that is the same way, only a little bit more up-tempo. It is a Charleston team that does a better job of being able to generate turnovers, and for Liberty, they do a good job of taking away second chances. Charleston, they do a good job of getting second chance opportunities, getting a rebound on 32.9% of their misses, but with Liberty, I think that they're going to have a tough time with the 6'10" Brazovic down low. You do have Kyle Rohde, who's a nice point forward, 16 points, 4 boards, 3 assists per contest, but I do think that Liberty did get a little bit exposed yesterday for the fact that they didn't necessarily play the world's greatest competition. You got a Charleston team that I do think is a little bit on the come up. I do think that for Charleston, the pieces are starting to work out, and for this Liberty bunch, I think that they're going to have a tough time with the versatility, in which are playing pretty much a more up-tempo clone of themselves. I think is actually a very good way of putting it, and obviously a team that plays a little bit of a different style of defense, but both of these teams are very deep. Liberty coming off of a back-to-back, laying 7 points is something I want absolutely no part of. I did set my total 142.5 as well. Charleston was a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago, so I'm diving in on the under, especially with those tired legs, and with my DK Network right up pick, I'm taking the points with Charleston. Set them as a 2.5 point underdog. 8:45, 8:46 on the betting board. It is Houston, and they are going to be on the road facing up against Xavier. The X-Men of Xavier are anywhere between 7.5 and 8 point underdogs, and total on this game finding it anywhere between 138 and 139. And with Houston, I do think that they should be able to control this game. I did set them as a 9-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay it. It is a Xavier team that isn't playing quite as up-tempo as they did a season ago, but they're still looking to push a relatively similar pace to what they did a season ago, right around about 50th, 55th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But I think that they're just going to be stonewalled by a Houston defense a year in and year out. They're in the top 10 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are back in the top 10 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I think that Houston is just going to absolutely clobber the Xavier team on the glass. With Xavier, right now your top rebounder is Quincy Oliveri with 5.1 rebounds per game. He's a guard with some size, but when that's your top rebounder, you know it's not going well. You've got Abdul Usman, who comes in from North Texas, able to give you about 8 points, 5 boards. He's a solid player, but the Xavier team last year, they had so much success because even though their defense was a little bit lackluster, they were able to bury threes at a 39.5% clip, and now they're without their top 6 scorers from a season ago, which means that Desmond Claude has had to do a little bit of everything for the team. He's shipping in their 16 points, 3.5 assists, a steal per game, but man, just not what it was a season ago. Meanwhile, for this Houston team, they just got one of the most impactful players in all of college basketball. I recognize that Jamal Shedd doesn't have like big scoring numbers or anything like that with only about 9 points per contest, but the way that he impacts the game with 3 steals, 6.5 assists, doles out the ball to guys like Emmanuel Sharp, LJ Cryer, with Cryer leading the way with 17 points, shooting 38% from 3-point range, and Houston is just so effective on the offensive end because they don't give away possessions. 8.1 turnovers per game. Recognize that they play quite slowly, but that's really good efficiency. Jawan Roberts does a good job of just clobbering on the glass. If you're an opponent and you miss your first shot, you're not getting a second shot on this Houston team. They're always towards the top of all of college basketball in terms of rebound rate. I think that this is going to be a masterclass from Houston in terms of their defense. I do think that it's going to be a lower scoring game, and I don't want to lay much more than the 7.5/8. Right now, it is still a true road game, but I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8.5 with Houston, set them as a 9-point favorite, and I think that Xavier, a team that's just way down with their shooting from a season ago, gets stonewalled. Set my total at a 133, diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Houston. 847, 848 on the betting board. It is the men of Troy, and they play SIU Edwardsville. Edwardsville finds themselves as underdogs of 3.5 to 4 points, and your total on this game finding it anywhere between 140.5 and 141. With Edwardsville, I did set them as an underdog of 2.5 points. 3 or more was my buy point on them, so we have reached that. And for Edwardsville, they've really slowed down the tempo. They are a bottom 40 team in terms of total possessions per game, going up against a Troy Brunch that they lose a lot from last season. They're going to be out to Brunch with Christian Eugene leading the way with 16 points, 3.5 assists per contest. It's been a case where he's been able to do a relatively solid job for the offense, and he's gotten a little bit more three-point shooting with Titan Conway being able to give you 11.5 points, currently shooting 43% from three-point range. But for Troy, 16 turnovers per game. That is not great, to say the least. They face off against an SIU Edwardsville team in which they've got the Wright brothers and Shamar and Lamar Wright. Those are of relation to Lorenzo Wright. Both of these guys are 6'7". Both of these guys are willing to let it fly from three-point range, and it really is going to be a tempo battle because you've got a Troy team that currently ranks in the top 10 in the country in terms of possessions per game. Now, I will say that's a very warped number because in their games against Division I opponents, you had that double overtime game against Oregon State, you had that single overtime game against Siena State, so they played about 15 more minutes than most other teams, so that does play a little bit of an effect. But I mean, with Shamar Wright on the flip side for SIU Edwardsville, talk about a guy that's able to take over the game, 17.5 points, 4 boards, shooting 39.5% from three-point range. And then additionally, you've got a guy that has been in this backcourt for a very long time that has done a nice job of being able to dole it out, and Rashawn Taylor. Gives you about 3 assists, shooting 44% from 3. And for Edwardsville, they have slowed down the tempo to make themselves more efficient. They're turning the ball over less than ever before at 10.5 turnovers per game. They're shooting 39.5% from 3, which we should see a little bit of a drop-off there. And they don't necessarily have ideal size, but DeMarco Minor, he plays much bigger than what he is. He's 6 feet tall, and he's averaging 10 rebounds per game. Last year, he averaged more like 5.5 boards per contest. I don't think he's going to be able to keep up the 10 rebounds per game for the entirety of the season, but it has been a marvel to take a look at him. Now, I will say for Edwardsville, it is a little bit of a top-heavy team after your first 4 all averaging at least 11.5 points per game. You've only got one other player averaging more than 4.3 points per game, and Terrence Thompson, who comes in actually from old UW Green Bay, and he's been able to make a little bit of an impact for this team. And Troy does have a little bit more depth. You've got someone like Amir Muhammad who's been able to give you 9 points per game, but it is a Troy team that it feels like they're playing way too fast for their own good. I know that Coach Scott Cross always likes to play up-tempo, but it just doesn't feel like he necessarily has the personnel to be able to do so. As a result, this is a Troy team that in all of their games against D1 opponents thus far this season, they have allowed at least 76 points, except for when they played against a Grambling team that's all out of sorts. It's a good old situation of something's got to give because this is an Edwardsville team that's given up 67 or fewer in 3 out of their last 4 games, and they're playing super duper slow. This is a total that I personally set at a 134.5. I do think that Edwardsville is going to be able to slow this game down. I think that Troy is going to look themselves in the mirror and realize, yeah, this tempo that we're playing at is a little bit too fast. So I'm going to be diving in on the under. I do think that because Edwardsville slows this game down, they hang in there. I'm going to take 3 or more with Edwardsville. 849, 850 on the betting board. It is Georgia playing us a Mercer. Mercer is a 14.5 to a 15-point underdog with your total between 138.5 and 139. And with Mercer, set them as 13.5-point underdogs. So I'm going to be willing to take the points. Big time win a few nights ago for Georgia. Being able to go on the road, they were trailing throughout the entirety of the game. They get the job done in the ACC versus SEC challenge as an 8+ point underdog against Florida State. Just not impressed by this Florida State team, though. And for Georgia, it is an offense that's a little bit all over the place as well. His bunch has been able to exceed the 70-point plateau just once in their last 5 games. They were able to do so against Oregon because 100 billion fouls were called. But you've also got a Mercer team that's been pretty anemic with their offense as well. For Mercer, they have not broken 70 points against a D1 opponent as far as the season. So I do think that you might be in for a little bit of a rock fight. I did set my total at a 139.5, though, because this is also a Mercer team that, even though they're playing slowly, the defense has not necessarily been on par. But I do think that we are going to see a little bit of a bounce back for this Mercer Mercer team on offense. They have been turning the ball over about 13 times per contest. They play against a Georgia team that really doesn't generate a lot of steals at about 6 per contest. And I do think that with Georgia not having a lot down low other than Russell Chewa, the 7-footer from South Florida that's able to give you 6 rebounds per game, that this Mercer team is going to be able to match up a little bit on the glass. Jalen McCrary has been able to give you 4.5 rebounds, 15-plus points per game. And then you bring in Amanzi Nagabezi, who comes over from Jacksonville State, actually began his career at Georgia, by the way. So welcome back, Potter. He's been able to shoot about 31% from 3 for his career. It's a 6'9", little bit of a combo player. I do think that versatility is going to throw Georgia for a little bit of a loop. And for Georgia, they are starting to figure out their offense a little bit more with Noah Thomason coming in from Niagara. He played in one of the slowest tempo systems in all of college basketball, and yet he still last year had 19.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists. It is a Georgia team. I think there should be a little bit of positivity with their 30.5% three-point shooting. Not that they're going to go into flamethrower mode or anything like that, but I do think that they're a little bit better than that. Georgia's been able to do an okay job of taking care of the ball as well, about 11.5 turnovers per game. They just have some misfit pieces, like RJ Melendez gives you about 8 points, 5 rebounds per game. It just feels like he doesn't really do anything well. It's not like he does anything terrible, but he really doesn't do anything well. Silas Damari Jr. has come in as a freshman. He's been able to log about 8 points, 2.5 assists per game. He's been a nice little number 2 ball handler for this team, but I do take a look at this Georgia bunch. I do think that they should be able to get the job done, but I don't think that they dominate on the glass the way that they should for Mercer to get completely steamrolled, as it's been a little bit of a rough go of it for Mercer, but I do think that they're going to be able to get their offense going just a little bit more in this one to be able to hold in there. I'm willing to take 14 or more with Mercer, and I did set my total at 139.5. Banking on Georgia, starting to hit some of those threes. So looking at the over and the points with Mercer, 851, 852 on the betting board. Indiana plays us at Maryland. Maryland is an underdog of between 2 and 2.5 points, and your total is between 137 and 138. I said Maryland is a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be taking them outright on the money line. I've really not liked what I've seen out of both of these teams thus far this season, but with this Indiana team, it just feels like they are not really finding their footing right now. They had a nice win against Harvard, where in the second half, they finally got it going from 3-point range, but for Indiana, it just feels like the rotations are not online for this team. Khalil Ware, Mackenzie Mbakpo, they just can't play with one another. I really would like to see them somehow, some way, find a way to get Peyton Sparks 4 minutes. He played just 4 minutes in that game against Harvard, and when Indiana had that very fortunate cover on opening numbers against Louisville, I mean, it was Peyton Sparks that really got the team to victory, along with the Miami transfer down low and Anthony Walker. So I take a look at this Indiana team. They've got a lot of depth down low, but other than Khalil Ware, it just feels like the rotations are off with Ware. He has been awesome, a former top 25 recruit, 17.5 points, 9 boards, and I recognize that the numbers for Malik Renew are good in terms of him throwing out the ball, putting in there some points, but it does feel like the offense is more clunky when he's out there. I really can't describe it, but it just feels like he's not a good fit with his team. Meanwhile, you've seen Trey Galloway go in the toilet bowl with his shooting. Last year shot 46% from 3. This year he's shooting 16.5% from 3. Do I think that there's some positivity coming? Oh, absolutely, but at the same time, I also thought that there was a lot of positivity coming from Maryland, and Maryland in their last game against Rider, when they had entered shooting about 21.5% from 3-point range, they went into inferno mode. They put up north of 100 points, and I do think that they've got the best guard in this game, and that'd be Jameer Young. Jameer Young is able to do it all with 16 points, 4.5 assists, shoots 34% from 3-point range, and for this Maryland team as a whole, they're still only shooting about 23.5% from 3, so I think there's more coming. Now, they need to get more of their freshman into Deshaun Harris-Smith. He's putting up 8 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists per game on 5.3% 3-point shooting. Greg Peterson could shoot better than 5.3% from 3-point range, and I fully am aware how hard it is with closeouts and everything like that, but I still think I could shoot better than 5.3% from 3-point range. Jordan Geronimo, the Indiana transfer, he's been shooting 14% from 3-point range. You just need to get a little bit more down low outside of Dante Scott and Julian Reese, and you do need a little bit more from Scott other than the 4.5 rebounds per game he has been providing, but he has been able to give this team a little bit of an inside-out presence. This is a Maryland team that feels like they've got things sorted out in the backcourt a little bit more, and I'm not sure if it's just me, but I do look at these Big Ten conference games a little bit differently than in January and February. It just feels like that home court environment just isn't quite there in December, as opposed to when you do have the calendar flipped to 2024 in this case, or just after Christmas in general. So it is a case where I'm going to be willing to back Maryland outright on the money line. Did set my total at 132. Neither of these teams are playing up tempo. Neither of these teams have really gotten their offense going since their really last game in the case of both Maryland and Indiana. So So diving in on the under, and I'm going to be taking a look at Maryland outright on the money line. 853, 854 on the betting board. It is Manhattan, and they play us some Mount St. Mary's. The Mount finds themselves as between 2 and 2.5 point favorites, and your total is between 137 and 138.5. I did set Manhattan as a favorite of 2 points. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line as a home underdog. Now, when it comes to the Metro Atlantic, this is probably the conference in which you have the least value in terms of home court advantage because one of these teams are all in the New York, New Jersey area. So you really don't have a lot of travel involved. These guys are not having to slog through a whole bunch of flights or anything like that. But that said, with this Manhattan team, I think that they're the better coach team with John Gallagher at the helm. I really love the job that he did over at Hartford a few seasons ago, and I do think that he's starting to find out what he's all got with the team, as Sidhu Traore has been a very underrated freshman. 13.5 points, 9 boards. Not a guy that's going to light it up from three-point range, but impacts all aspects of the game. He's been able to get a little bit of something out of Brett Ruppel as well. He comes over from St. Bonaventure, where he was a little bit of an afterthought, and he's turned into a guy that's able to dole out the ball with about 5 assists per game. At 6'4", he's got relatively good size for a main ball handler. Need a bit more out of Briggs McLean. He came in as Hartford's main scorer from season ago, and he's only been able to give the team right around about 2.5 points per game, and the 15 turnovers per game for Manhattan. That's a little bit ghastly, but for Mount St. Mary's, the specialty for the team the last few seasons has been having guys like Malik Jefferson and company do a good job of hitting the glass. They've only got one player right now averaging more than 4.5 rebounds per game. Jetty Cordelia, he comes over from the Netherlands, and he's a part-time starter last year that has been able to do a solid job with about 7.5 points per contest, 5 boards. He doesn't shoot threes at all, and without the team having a main post presence, they're a little bit doomed, especially with Jalen Benjamin, their main ball handler from a season ago, gone. This is still a relatively slow-tempo Mount St. Mary's team that is now turning the ball over 15 times per contest. You've not necessarily gotten what you wanted out of Dola Adebayo as well. Comes in from the great state of Florida. He's only been able to give the team right around 7 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. I think he's of relation to Bam Adebayo as well. I might be mistaken on that, but really the guy that's having to do it all on offense for the Mount is Dakota LaFew, who last season was a really good three-point shooter, but now he has to have the ball in his hands a whole heck of a lot more. Now he doesn't have Jalen Benjamin to take the ball out of his hands a little bit more, and he has to just really do it all. With LaFew last season, he had 13 points on 38% three-point shooting. This year, he's got 15.5 points per game, but that efficiency is way down. He is shooting about 23% from three-point range. George Tinsley is not really giving you a lot on the offensive end. Mount St. Mary's is playing like 9 or 10 guys, but that's because they just really don't know what they have. Recognize that for Manhattan, they have been getting lambasted, but when you play against UConn and Kansas, your numbers are going to look a little bit worse, and the Mount has not been challenged like that since their game against Maryland a little bit earlier in the season. So I do look in this spot. I recognize that the Mount's numbers are better than that of a 1-4 team, but for Manhattan, I do think that they get the job done at home. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line, and I did set my total at 136. This is a Mount St. Mary's team that's not finding their footing on offense, and both of these teams are just turning the ball over so much that the turnover production would make Sarah Lee's Bakery blush. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under and Manhattan outright on the money line. 855, 856 on the betting board. Iona hits the road face-off against Fairfield. The Stags of Fairfield are an underdog of 3.5 points. Total is between 148 and 148.5. Said Iona is a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Iona. They just have flat out more talent than Fairfield, as Fairfield still awaiting the return of Alexis yet. No, I don't know if he's going to be returning at all. That guy has been so banged up throughout his college basketball career that it's not even funny. So whatever they get, they get. They've been dealing with having Barima Sek not be able to develop as well. This guy has not been able to get out there on the floor thus far this season. We don't know if he's going to be able to get out there on the floor. So those are two main post presence that Fairfield was going to be relying upon that they currently don't have. James Johns is a former top 300 or so recruit that has not really developed as well. 7 points per contest. He's been dealing with some injuries. You've been dealing with injuries as well with one of your top scorers, and Jalen Leach, who's been able to give you about 8 or so points per contest, actually closer to 10 points per contest. But for Fairfield, you just need to find someone other than Bryson Gudine to be able to help out as well, as he's dealt with injuries all throughout his career as well. He's already missed a game or two thus far this season. It's a Fairfield team that's all sorts of banged up. They really have no size down low. They've got one guy that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game in Jasper Floyd, who at 6'3" is able to give you 6 boards per contest. And though Iona, they're dealing with an injury to their top big man in Osborne Shema as as well. Still have someone like Wiesa Ponzo at 6'7". He's able to bury threes at a 37% clip. Last year, actually shot 46% from three. Iona as a whole, they're shooting about 35.5% from three-point range. Isaac Trout, he comes over from Harvard. He has been the main guy with about 16.5 points per game. And for Iona, they have a nice pass-first point guard in Joel Brown. He comes in from Cal, where it's easy to go at Cal. He was a starter for a team that, well, they stunk in the Pac-12, but it was still a Pac-12 team, and he's been able to give out 3.5 assists, 3 steals. He's impacted the game in so many ways, even though he is only scoring right around 8 points per contest. He is able to hook up guys like one of the top junior college transfers in all of college basketball, like Greg Gordon, who's been able to give you 12.5 points per contest. He's got some relatively solid depth with this Iona team. And for Iona, they don't have great size, but they certainly have more than Fairfield right now. Fairfield has just been completely out of sorts in terms of their offense, as 2 of their last 3 games against D1 opponents, they have failed to break the 63-point plateau. For Iona, recognize that they are currently losers of 4 out of their last 5, but they played close against Long Beach State. They were able to hang in there against Marist. They get a win against Buffalo by a very convincing margin, and the defense has honestly looked a little bit better, giving up fewer than 70 points in 2 out of their last 3 games. So it is a spot where I set my total 145.5. Fairfield is playing a little bit more up-tempo, but they just have not been able to find their footing in really any facet of basketball at this point, with their coach and Jay Young getting canned weeks before the season. So going to be willing to lay up to 4.5 with Iona. Set my total 145.5. So diving under to go along with the Gales. 857, 858 on the betting board. It is Ryder on the road facing off against Siena. Siena is between a 4.5 to a 5-point home underdog, and your total on this game is 134. And I set Ryder as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay in the number. Ever since Siena lost Michael Ealy, they just have not been the same. Now, the good news is, get back Michael Ealy, and that was big for them. They still got absolutely lambasted against Albany, but he had 20 of the team's 51 points, so that shows you where they were without him. So I certainly had to upgrade Siena, or else they'd be like an 8-point underdog in this spot, because, man, they were getting absolutely nothing going. But they've also been dealing with some other injuries, like Zach Tevin. He's just returned to the fold as well. You could tell that he was not 100% in his first game back against Albany. He played 16 minutes. He had 1 point and 4 turnovers. When you're getting 4 times the turnovers as you are points, that's not necessarily a good sign for Siena. They just as a whole have been a sloppy team. 17.8 turnovers per game, and fully recognize that Ryder got just completely cooked for north of 100 points against a Maryland team that hadn't been able to put the ball in the basket all season long. But you just have better rebounding with this team, with Mervyn James at 6'7", being able to make such an impact with this team. He's been able to give you 7 boards, 17.5 points per game. Tariq Ingram down low is able to give you 7 boards as well. Now, you need the 3-point shooting to come along for the ride. TJ Weeks, for his career over at UMass, was able to log about 9 points per contest as a mid-33 point shooter. He's only giving you about 7 points per game. You got Allen Boom Boom Powell thus far this season is shooting 18.5% from 3. Last 2 seasons was averaging double figures. He's only been able to give you 6 points per game, but I do think that things are going to be able to come along, as you've got a Siena team that just feels like they've got a lot of misfit pieces. They lose darn near everything from last year, as a lot of these teams in the Metro Atlantic, they're just going through it as well. But for Siena, I mean, the sadness is truly there for the team. Outside of opening night against Holy Cross, they have not broken the 60-point plateau. For Ryder, I fully recognize that this team as well, up until that game against Maryland, against C1 competition, they had not gotten past 65 either. So I do think that this is going to be a slow, rather sad game. Set my total at 131.5, but even with Ely back in the fold, I don't think it's enough for a Siena team that they just can't stop turning the ball over. I set my line at 5.5 with Ryder being the favorite, so going to be one to lay it. Set my total at 131.5, so also diving in on the under. 859, 860 on the betting board. It is South Carolina playing host to George Washington. Our nation's first president is a 9 to 9.5 point underdog, and your total staying between 148 and 149. I did set South Carolina as a 6-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with old George Washington. With South Carolina, we were talking about this team a little bit with Blake Lovell, and I have been highly impressed with them as well. I thought that South Carolina was going to stink on ice this season as well, and hey, you know what? With South Carolina, they've been able to get some good point guard play out of Taylon Cooper. It's not necessarily what he's doing, but what he's not doing. And you know what he's not doing? Turning the ball over. 5.2 assists, 0.8 turnovers per game while shooting 40% from 3. You can't ask for much more out of a point guard. Granted, he's only scoring about 9 points per contest, but you'll take that if you're darn near any team in all of college basketball. Now, where South Carolina is weak is down low. They do have 4 separate guys that are able to give you at least 4 rebounds per game, but BJ Mack is right now your leader in boards, 5 boards, 16 points per game. You need a little bit more rebounding there. Beachy Johnson has turned into a nice go-to scorer, but sometimes he can be a little bit reckless, much like James Bishop IV on the flip flip side for George Washington. He's putting up 21 points, 5 assists per game. Sometimes a bad shot for him is better than a good shot for his teammates, but he's got 3 other guys behind him that are really able to help out. Maximus Edwards, he's been going to the maximum with 17 plus points, 6 plus boards. I absolutely love his game. Darren Buchanan Jr. as a freshman, 5 boards, 13.5 points per game. And then Garrett Johnson. How about what this freshman has been able to do? 15 points, 7 boards. He stands right around 6'8", and he's shooting 48.5% from three-point range. Now, what is ailing this George Washington team? They don't necessarily have a ton of depth. They have those 4 guys, and then nobody else that averages north of 5.5 points per game, but they've been able to get a little bit of rebounding down low out of Babatunde Akangbola. He's been able to come in and has been able to give the team right around 4.5 rebounds per game. Spent the beginning part of his career at Auburn, so I do like his overall size. And for George Washington, talk about a team playing at warp speed. They are number 1 in the country in all of college basketball, but after last season, their defense that was just absolutely abysmal has really kicked it into high gear. I mean, it is not very often that you see a team, because they did play that double overtime game against Ohio, but a team going this up-tempo give up 74 points or fewer in regulation in 4 of their last 5 games, but they have done that. And for the South Carolina team, sans that game against Virginia Tech, this team has yet to allow north of 68 points as well. Now, granted, we need to see a little bit more of the South Carolina team before I can anoint them this big of a favorite, but you've got a South Carolina team that's in the bottom 75 in terms of total possessions per game, a George Washington team playing at just warp speed. I did, as a result, set my total 148. So here at a 149, diving in on the under, I think that the George Washington defense holds up. I'm willing to take the points with them. As I said, our nation's first president as an underdog of 6 points, so take the points and the under. 861, 862 on the betting board. West Virginia plays host to St. John's. St. John's is a favorite of between 3.5 and 4 points. Your total setting between 145.5 and 146. This line opened up at 2.5, and here at the 3.5, it's about the max I'd be willing to lay. It's starting to get seamed up a little bit too high, but that said, I am going to be willing to lay the 3.5 with St. John's. This is a red sword team that is very much a work in progress, but you know who else is a work in progress? Our good friends West Virginia, and you wish Josh Eilert absolutely nothing but the best, but man, they're currently without Kirk Kriisa. Jesse Edwards has been tremendous down low at 16 points, 10.5 rebounds per game, but this team is just looking for warm bodies to be able to fill minutes. They're currently going with a 6-man rotation with one of those guys in Ofari Nave getting minutes. That's not a guy that I was really expecting to get minutes for. This is West Virginia team coming into the season. West Virginia just completely lacking outside shooting. Right now, the only guy shooting north of 34.5% from 3 that is seeing meaningful minutes is Quinn Slazinski. I mean, he's been tremendous coming over from Iona. I did not think that he had it in him. 16 points, 4.5 boards, shooting 38% from 3. He's a 6'8", do-it-all sort of player, but I do think that Jules Soriano is going to be able to win that battle down low against Jesse Edwards, currently averaging a double-double, 16 points, 10 rebounds per game, and you just have better play in the backcourt, in my opinion. Now, you do have on the flip side Seth Wilson, who had one of the best assist-to-turnover ratios in all of college basketball for West Virginia season ago, but he's a little bit of a lower usage guy. Meanwhile, Dennis Jenkins, 5.8 assists per contest. It is a St. John's team that they are turning the ball over a little bit too much. 14 turnovers per game. Jordan Dingle, after he was Mr. Do-It-All, the top scorer at Penn, he's had a little bit of a tough time acclimating in his new role, but you know it's good for St. John's. They play against a West Virginia team that's averaging 3.7 steals per game. They're getting less than 1 steal every 10 minutes. That's really not good. That's not good at all. And for West Virginia, talk about a team that's been stuck in the mud. 65 points or fewer scored in 4 out of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a St. John's team that they themselves have been getting absolutely cooked, giving up 82 plus points at 3 out of their last 5 games. So it's a good old situation, once again, of something's got to give. I did set my total at 146. I do think that West Virginia going to be able to find a little bit more of a semblance of offense, and for St. John's under Rick Pitino, I think that this team is looking to run. And for the St. John's team, even though I was mentioning the defense getting absolutely cooked, sans that game against North Texas, they have been able to get to 73 and darn near every one of their games thus far this season, 80 plus points in each of their last 3 games. And you got to feel like St. John's going to try to feed some of these guys that have been a little bit more of afterthoughts, like Glenn Taylor Jr., Naheem Alim, just to be able to get them a little bit of buy-in. So I do think that St. John's cranks up their tempo. I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 with them. Set my total at 146, so here at 145.5, going over, and willing to lay 3.5 with St. John's. 863, 864 on the betting board. Niagara is going to be playing against the St. Peter's. The Peacocks are a 1 to 1.5 point underdog, and your total between 123.5 and 124.5. I set my total at 124.5. I am really not willing to go any further over than the 124, but I am going to be willing to take the over. Now, the last time I bet on a St. Peter's game, I did it right up for them to go over the total against Rutgers, and St. Peter's did not do their part with a grand total of 40 points. Prior to that, though, they had gotten to at least 60 points in each of their previous 3 games, and I do think that was just a little bit of an outlier of a result. You do have a St. Peter's team that is in the top 20 in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound. This team has been very good on the glass. You got Michael Hoagie, who's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. They are currently dealing with an injury to Corey Washington, who was very much a do-it-all player last season, and this year was logging about 11 points, 6 boards per contest, so that does put them a little bit behind the 8 ball, and it's been a little bit touch and go with the transfer of Marcus Randolph, who comes in from Richmond. He's been very much able to give this team some three-point shooting from the outside with about 9 points per game, but feels like he'll either give you like 15 plus or give you 3. Really not a lot of consistency there. And for St. Peter's, the 15.5 turnovers per game, one of the worst marks in all of college basketball. Good news is they go up against a Niagara team that they really do not seek steals. Niagara, they're one of the slower teams in all of college basketball as well ever since Greg Paulus has taken over. I don't think they've cracked the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and they don't have a ton down low. They've got one guy giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. That would be Harlan Ibiola. He's been able to do a solid job down low with 6 points, 7 boards per contest. But with that said, I did set Niagara as a 4.5 point favorite because I do like what they have in the backcourt. Ahmad Henderson II has been able to come in as a freshman, and he's been a takeover guy. How about 2.5 assists, 16 points per game on north of 40% three-point shooting. Obeng Mensa comes in from UMBC with 10 points, 4.5 boards per contest. You've got a defense that does a very good job of being able to just man up, and I do expect some positivity out of Kawan Marble moving forward as well. Marble, during the 2020-21 season at Wyoming, was able to put in their 9.5 points, 4 boards per contest. Last few seasons have been touch and go. Was over at Loyola Marymount. Clearly was not a good fit there. I do think that with his 6'5" versatility, he's going to be able to take the top off of defense, and I do like the upside of Luke Bubalo as well. 2 seasons ago at Ball State, he averaged 11 points on 36% three-point shooting. I do think that Niagara has some scorers that St. Peter's just does not. I do think that the backcourt of Niagara leads the team to victory. I did set Niagara's 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this small number, and at a 124 or less, going to be taking a look at the over. 865, 866 on the betting board is Quinnipiac, and they're going to be on the road facing off against Canisius. The Golden Griffins of Canisius are a 3.5 to a 4 point favorite, and your total on this game is there between 150.5 and 151. I did set my total at a 148, so I am going to be taking a look at the under, and this is a spot where I'm going to be taking a look at Quinnipiac with the points. With Canisius, I have been highly impressed by this team thus far this season, but I do think that with Quinnipiac, they're going to be able to do a nice job down low. They bring in Richie Springs from UConn. He's been able to log about 6 rebounds per game. Matt Blonich is someone who has all sorts of versatility as well, has been shooting well north of 35% from three-point range over the last few seasons. He's been able to really pile up the points this far this season, logging about 18 points per contest. He's able to do a solid job on the glass, as well as Paul Otinho, who's been able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game. Now, the top rebounder as a whole in this game, that'd be Canisius, is Frank Mitchell. He has come in from the non-D1 ranks, and he's logging 12 points, 10 boards. He's been absolutely incredible. And Trey Dinkins has an assist-to-turnover ratio that's darn near 3. He's been able to dole out the ball to the man whose last name is very hard to say, and Siam Utejendal. He comes over from overseas, and he's been able to give you 14 points per contest for a Canisius team that is currently shooting 39% from three-point range. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of fall off there, especially with them currently dealing with Staj Stevetsky, who's currently out of the fold. You do lose Jaco Fritz from last season for Canisius as well, but Yuri Fritz, his brother, he fills in as a 6'9" versatile player that's able to give you multiple assists, a steal and a half, 4 boards, doesn't necessarily score a ton, but he's been rock solid. But I take a look at this Canisius team, giving up nearly 14 turnovers per game. That's a little bit of a red flag. Quinnipiac does a little bit of a better job of being able to take care of the ball, but you also have for Quinnipiac really the top facilitator in this game. That'd be Savion Lewis. How about 8.2 assists per game? That is second in all of college basketball, turning the ball over less than 3 times per contest. He's able to get the ball into all these guys' hands, and you've been able to notice the emergence as well of Amari Tice. He comes over from Wofford, where he was a part-time starter, and has really been able to make an impact as a 6'7" combo player, chipping in there nearly 2 blocks, 2 steals, 11.5 points, 5 boards, just makes plays for this Quinnipiac team. Now with Quinnipiac, points allowed on a per possession basis has been a little bit rough for them, but they've been able to get things going with wins in 4 out of their last 5 games after they took a little bit of an L against UMass. Meanwhile, you've got a Canisius bunch that they themselves have been able to do a solid job with their offense, being able to score 70 plus in each of their last 3 games. But if you look at the competition that both of these teams have played, it's not necessarily been too terrific. And for Quinnipiac, defense has gotten much better as things have been going along as well, giving up 70 or fewer in now 3 out of their last 5 games. I do think that this is going to be a game where both of these teams see their offensive efficiency go down just a touch, especially with Canisius with all that good 3-point shooting. I did set that total at a 148, so here at a 150, going to be diving in on the under. With Quinnipiac, won't take anything north of 2 with them. 867, 868 on the betting board. It is Little Rock playing host to Arkansas State. Arkansas State is a 1.5 to a 2-point underdog. And your total between 159.5 and 161. And with Little Rock, I set them as a 1.5 point underdog. I like Arkansas State outright on the money line. Such an intriguing battle between these two, but you've got a pair of teams that they have really been looking to gun it. I think that both of these teams are actually taken over by Alabama assistants, so both know each other very well. But I look at this Arkansas State team, and I just love what this team has in the backcourt. Taryn Todd, Freddie Hicks are combining for 28 points, 9.5 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, and Hicks is bombing it at 37.5% from 3-point range now with Arkansas State. This defense is about as bad as Casper the Friendly Ghost trying to play defense. There's been none of it at all, but you've got DeAndre Dominguez being able to chip in there as a 6'9" combo player, 9 boards, 12 points. He's shooting in the low to mid-30s from 3-point range, and then some of the holdovers from last season are impact guys as well. In fact, Caleb Fields stole out 3 assists per game. I would like to see a little bit more out of Avery Felts after a season ago. He shot 39% for 3 with 8 points per contest. He's been a little bit more of an afterthought for the team, but they do go up against a Little Rock bunch, and they just have not been able to get who they were hoping would be the main rim protector out there on the floor, and that would be Mikal Mitchell, who was over at Arkansas last season, 2 seasons ago, was a part of the Mitchell brother duo over there at Rhode Island. You got Kalen Robinson, who's bounced around college basketball, playing at Texas A&M, Arkansas. He's currently logging 19 points per game, but with Kalen Robinson, he's currently dealing with a little bit of an injury, and he's likely going to be out of the fold. He's missed each of the last 2 games out. Little Rock was able to win those 2 games without him, but yeah, I do have your concerns on that front with this team, as now you're going to be looking at D'Antoni Gordon to really run the offense. He's been able to give you about 17 points, 5 boards per contest. Jameer Chaplin does a good job of being able to grab boards as well, but really outside of what you've been able to get in terms of the 38% 3-point shooting from Cougar Downing, who has come in from the non-Division I level, and he's been able to be a really nice outside shooter. You don't have a ton of that for this Little Rock team. They take care of the ball with about 11.5 turnovers per game, but Robinson was really that do-it-all floor general for this team, and without him, this Arkansas State team is really looking to push tempo. I think that they're going to be able to get their pace. I do think that they're going to make my life miserable in general for this old Little Rock team, and I do think that Arkansas State, playing against a Little Rock team that is dealing with their top scorer right now being out of the fold, is able to get the job done. I sent Arkansas State as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm looking at them outright on the money line, and did set my total at 161.5. Here at 159.5, 161. Going to be taking a look at the over in a game that I think is going to be very up and down to go along with Arkansas State. All right, on the money line, 869, 870 on the betting board. It is UAB and the Blazers play host to Southern Miss. Southern Miss is an underdog of 8 to 8.5 points with your total between 141.5 and 142. And with Southern Miss, I did set them as an underdog of 6.5 points. I am going to be one to take these points with Southern Miss. They are still currently without Andre Curbelo, and I will continue to say it. Them not having Andre Curbelo out there on the floor, not necessarily the world's worst thing. You've got Austin Crowley, who I like the way that he's able to operate in this offense. 17 points, 3.5 assists per game. And for Southern Miss, they do a good job of being able to win the ball control battle. They generate 9.5 steals per game, while they themselves only turn the ball over about 11.7 times per game. It is a Southern Miss bunch at shooting about 32% from three-point range, though Donovan Ivory, he's really been the saving grace in terms of their outside shooting. 14 points per game for the UW Green Bay transfer, 5 boards, shooting 46% from three-point range. But I do think that this team is going to be able to hold up down low. You don't get a ton of rebounds out of Victor Iwakar, but he comes over from UNLV. He's been a nice shot blocker with about a block and a half per contest. They go up against a UAB bunch. Last year, Trey Jemison was really able to make an impact down low. Now he's out of the fold, so they've been looking a lot to one Javion Davis to be able to really hold it down low. Last year, 6 points, 4 boards. He's really had to turn into that rim protector for this team with about 8 rebounds per game. And it is a UAB team that they lose their top scorer in Jordan Jelly Walker from the season ago. I like the guys that they brought in from the junior college level, as you've got Yaxel Lenborg and Alejandro Vasquez. Don't call their name. They're able to give you about 18 points per contest. Lenborg is able to give you about 7 boards per game, but this is a UAB team that they don't have the shooting that they did a season ago. They've got one guy on the roster that's currently shooting north of 30% from three-point range, and Ephraim Johnson, so he'll shoot about 36.5% from three. Now, I do think that it'll get better than their 25.5% three-point shooting, especially with Daniel Ortiz getting more minutes. Last season over at North Alabama, shot 41% from the outside, but the Southern Miss team really does hang their head on defense. It's been a little bit more touch and go for them thus far this season, but I do think that's going to be kicking up a little bit. This team does a nice job of being able to generate turnovers, and for a UAB team that's a little bit out of sorts in the backcourt with so many losses from a season ago, I do think that this is a Southern Miss team that's going to be able to hold in this game, and I do think that this game is going to be slightly more up-tempo as well. I think that this game is going to be close enough for some late-game fouling, so did set my total at 144.5, looking over, and at 7 or more, take the points with Southern Miss. 871, 872 on the betting board. DePaul is going to be playing against Iowa State. Iowa State finds themselves as favorites of 12 to 12.5 points, and your total is between 139 and 139.5. George Mikan is right now rolling over in his grave about this DePaul team, and I set them as 14-point underdogs. I recognize that in step-up games that Iowa State has been having a little bit of a tough time with better competition. This is not better competition. This is not better competition at all. I mean, this is a DePaul team that's right now 1-5. It's really sad to see where they have fallen. The only team they've knocked off thus far this season is South Dakota. Losses to Fort Wayne, Northern Illinois, South Carolina, Long Beach State, San Francisco. Good grief. These guys stink. You've got Chico Carter, who's been able to shoot about 37% from 3, 13.5 points per game. He was at South Carolina a season ago. He's a very good 3-point shooter, but you've got nothing down low. Like, you've got Jeremiah Oden, who comes in from Wyoming, and he was a fine player at Wyoming, but I mean, he wasn't even Wyoming's best player a season ago. He's leading the way with 4.3 rebounds per game. Like, this is a complete lack of size. I recognize that they were expecting Mac Etienne to be out there on the floor, but you know about his injury history. You needed a little bit more than that, and it's just really sad in general. They brought in Caleb Murphy, who they thought was going to be able to elevate the offense. That has not been the case, and for DePaul, I really have my question marks about them holding on to the ball against an Iowa State team that still won the tops in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're one of the best teams at pickpocketing as well. And for DePaul, 14.3 turnovers per game. Now, Iowa State, you knew that there would be a little bit of regression with their offense. Going into that ESPN event, they were shooting like well north of 38% from three-point range. They're now shooting about 31.5% from distance, but they do take care of the ball with just 10 turnovers per game. Damon Lipsby has now been able to give you 16 points per game. He plays in tandem with Milan Milasilovic, who's been really solid with about 14 points per contest. Milasilovic has been able to shoot 45% from 3, and Lipsby, 6 boards, 6 assists, 3 steals per game. He is just the ultimate point guard, one of the best in all of college basketball. You've also got Keyshawn Gilbert, who's only shooting 24% from 3. That'll be rising up. He's a good go-to scorer, and this Iowa State team, they're generating 12 steals per game. I think Iowa State is going to rip the ball away left and right for DePaul, and I think that DePaul gets completely stonewalled in this game. I set my total at 130 just simply because I don't think that DePaul does their part with this total, and I think that this is going to be a point where DePaul's not going to be able to get to 60. So I'm diving in on the under with Iowa State, willing to lay up to 13.5 with them. 873, 874 on the betting board. It is Towson, and they're going to be playing at South Dakota State from the Sanford Pentagon, as South Dakota State, a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite. Totals between 131 and 132. This is officially a neutral court game, but I mean, this is in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is pretty much a home game for South Dakota State, and I did set them as a 6-point favorite. As a result, I am going to be willing to lay it with them. This Towson team is actually dead last in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're playing slower than Virginia right now. Towson is never really a super up-tempo team, but I mean, Pat Scary has a team playing at a scary slow tempo, and for Towson, man. This offense really has not been able to get online. This Towson team has yet to be able to break the 70-point plateau. They got to approximately 70 against Coppin State earlier this season, but they have no backcourt. Charles Thompson is solid down low. He's able to give you 9.5 points, 5.5 boards, block per contest, nice rim protector, but who's doling out the ball? Right now, you're looking at true freshman Dylan Williamson to be one of your main floor generals. You've been able to get about 11.5 points per game out of Tyler Tejada, who at 6'8" as a true freshman has shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, but South Dakota State is going to absolutely eat them alive with their guard play. Zeke Mayo is one of the most versatile mid-major players in all of college basketball. You name it, he does it. 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists, a steal, 18.5 points per game, shoots in the high 30s from three-point range typically, only shooting about 33% thus far this season, but they've got easily one of the most efficient shooters out there on the floor in Charlie Easley, who he's been able to log about 12 points per contest, shooting 48% from three-point range. Now, take caution in their game against a non-D1 team against Mount Marty, who, whenever I hear Mount Marty, I just picture a really tall guy named Marty eating a big giant pizza all by himself or something like that, but you did miss that game. I think he should be good to go in this one. That sounded like it was a little bit more precautionary, but you do want to be taking note there. But Luke Appel has been able to shoot 54% from three. South Dakota State, they're always able to bomb it from three. They're shooting 39% from three. The key is not turning the ball over, and they're only turning it over right around 12 times per game. They're going up against a Towson team that really doesn't generate a lot of turnovers at 5 per contest. I do think that this is going to be a game that gets slowed down a little bit more, but I do think that South Dakota State, they are able to light it up from three-point range, and as we know, South Dakota State, typically they give up some points as well. Even against Mount Marty, they gave up points, as in their games against C1 competition, the South Dakota State team has given up 70-plus in all but one of them, so I do think that Towson's going to get a little bit more online with their offense, but I do think that in the end, South Dakota State gets the job done, and with this being a neutral court game, you always want to take note as to whether or not you're going to be seeing a little bit of a weird shooter's eye or something like that. Same for Pentagon games, in my opinion, actually provide a very good shooter's eye. So looking at the over, semi-total 138, and South Dakota State one to lay up to 5.5 with them. 875, 876 on the betting board. It is Purdue. They hit the road to face off against Northwestern. Northwestern is a underdog of 7.5 to 8 points. In your total, it is 138 to 138.5 with Northwestern. I did set them as an underdog of 7.5 points. 8 is the minimum that I'm willing to take, but I'm willing to take them. We saw it with Purdue last season. They won so many Big Ten games, but they really didn't cover too many of these games on the road because they were like nip and tuck, like 2-point, 4-point wins, and this is a Northwestern team that has really slowed it down. They are in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and they've been really stinking efficient with regards to their defense as well. This is a Northwestern team that, in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, currently they are a top 40 team in all of college basketball. Granted, they have played against some lesser competition, and as we know, this is a Purdue team that, with Giant of the Year Zach Edey averaging a double-double, being the player of the year, averaging multiple blocks per game, they're certainly going to have their hands full there, as Purdue, they're currently clocking in 16th of the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. I do think that the big key for Northwestern, trying to just limit the ability of Braden Smith. Smith has been awesome this year. 13 points, 6 boards, 6 assists. He's taken that freshman to sophomore leap. Fletcher Lawyer, he's been a little bit better than last season. Would like to see a little bit more than 10 points per game, but he knows his role with this offense, so he's been fine. Mason Gillis is a guy with size that's able to pop some threes on Purdue. They're currently shooting 42.8% from three-point range. I thought they would be a better shooting team than a season ago, but I like Purdue last year shot 32.5% from three. It's going to be coming downward a little bit. This is a Northwestern team that traditionally guards the arc pretty well, and with Northwestern as well. What you like about this team is that they don't get out of sorts. They are one of the best teams at taking care of the ball in all of college basketball, 8.8 turnovers per game. In terms of turnovers per possession, they were a top 3 team in college basketball last season. You've got the dynamic duo of Berry along with Boo Buie back to the fold. Boo Buie, 3.5 assists, 18.5 points per game, shooting 40% from three. Berry shooting 38.5% from the outside, 9.5 points per game. And then this Northwestern team, they're going to lose a battle down low, but Brooks Barnheiser at right around about 6'7". He just makes impact plays, 15 points, 8 boards, 2.5 assists. They're going to look to mix and match down low, but I do think that the Liberty transfer in Blake Preston has been a really good glue guy. He's really been effective on the defensive end as well, and I do think that this is going to be a low-scoring slug. I think that Northwestern takes care of the ball. I think that they have a tough time putting the ball in the basket, but I do think that Northwestern going to guard the perimeter well. I think that we see some regression with this Purdue three-point shooting, and thus I set my total 129.5. I'm going to be diving in on the under end at 8 or more. I'm going to be taking the points with Northwestern, 877, 878 on the betting board. It is UConn, and they play out to Kansas. Kansas is a 2 to 2.5 point favorite, the total between 147.5 and 148. And in terms of this UConn team, I feel like they should be the favorite. I set them as 2.5 point favorites. I'm going to be taking them outright on the money line. With regards to this Kansas bunch, they just feel like they have some misfit pieces on their team right now, and they need a little bit more support for their big three. Hunter Dickinson, you know what he's going to be able to bring you. 20 and 10. He'll give you a block or two per contest. He's able to pop it from 3-point range. He has been tremendous. You need DeJuan Harris to give you a little bit more scoring. There are just times where he puts in there like 2 or 3 points in a game. It's like, man, I recognize you want to be a pass-first guy, and you do a very good job as pass-first guy, but you need to have the defense respect your shot just a little bit. So that's something that I do take a look at. And then you've obviously got Kevin McCullough. He just finds a way to impact the game. He doesn't necessarily do one thing amazing, but 18 points, 7.5 boards, 5.5 assists per game. He just finds a way to be able to give you some winning plays, but you need Marco Jackson along with Johnny Furphy to be able to step up. They both have been able to give you about 5.5 points per game. And for Jackson, he has been able to help out with doling out the ball a little bit. But this is a Kansas team that they're turning the ball over about 13.5 times per game. And this involves games against NC Central, Manhattan, Chaminade, Eastern Illinois. I know that they played some tough competition, but they've played some real cupcakes as well. UConn, they certainly have played their cupcakes as well. But when UConn has had these step-up games, they've responded every single time. They host Indiana. They win by 10 against Texas. They have me quite impressed right now. This is a UConn team that has someone in Donovan Clingan that only plays about 20 minutes per game, but in 20 minutes per game, he gives you 15 points, 6 boards, multiple blocks per contest, and then how about the versatility of Tristan Newton? He can go off for a triple-double on any given night. 8 boards, 7 assists, 15.5 points per game. Cam Spencer is so efficient. He's had one of the best assist-to-turnover ratios in all of college basketball. Even with Stephon Castle out of the fold, this team has not missed a beat because you've had the likes of Hassan Diarra be able to step up. This is a UConn team that is deep. They've got size. Alex Caravan is able to light it up from 3. He's able to do a good job on the glass. And for Kansas, feels like they're just a little bit too top-heavy, while UConn has a better overall collective. I know how difficult it is going to the Fog and win, but I'm going to take UConn in this spot. I really don't like what I'm seeing out of this Kansas team. I'm taking UConn outright on the money line. So I told 144.5. UConn is looking like one of the best defenses in all of college basketball, and Kansas has been a little bit out of sorts with their turnovers. So diving in on the under, and Kansas outright on the money line. 879, 880 on the betting board. It is Wyoming hitting the road face-off against Portland. Portland is a favorite of 2.5 points. Their totals between 149.5 and 150.5. And with Wyoming, I did set them as an underdog of 1.5 points. So being able to get 2 or more, I am going to be willing to take these points. With Wyoming, they do have Sam Griffin, who's able to be a nice do-it-all scorer for the team. Comes in from Tulsa, where Tulsa was just absolutely abysmal last season, but he got his numbers as he last year had about 15 points per contest. Now he's logging 19 points per game. I fully expect there to be a drop-off with his 48% three-point shooting, but the one thing this Wyoming team really needs to do a better job of is taking care of the ball. How about 15.5 turnovers per contest? Griffin has been able to give you about 3 assists per game, but the concern here is a cool cut. He has come up from the non-Division I ranks, and he's giving you 14.5 points and 3 assists per game. I still remember there was a game out there in the great state of South Carolina a few weeks ago. He had like 8 turnovers in 30 minutes. He's having north of 3 of them per contest. That's a little bit unsightly. You don't necessarily have a ton of rebounding for this Wyoming team. Been able to get about 8 boards per contest out of Cam Mainwawu. Hopefully I said that correctly, but they go up against a Portland team that they themselves, outside of Tyler Harris, have not necessarily gotten a ton on the glass, and I do think that we're going to see some regression for Harris. 15.5 points, 9 boards. He's shooting 59% from 3-point range, and Portland, they themselves have had their turnover woes right around 14.5 per contest. Love Tyler Robertson, 18 points, 5.5 assists. He has been in the Shante Leggins system for darn near 5 years now, so he's a veteran that he knows exactly what he needs to do with his team, and you do have a Wyoming team that has cranked up their tempo a little bit more, a mid-tempo team after last season. They were playing quite slowly. Portland has throttled it back a little bit as well, but they're still right around about 100th in terms of total possessions per game. The big question is, will Chris Austin get back to what he was 2 seasons ago? Mitch, all of last season, due to injury 2 years ago, was logging 14.5 points per game. Wasn't a great 3-point shooter, but it was able to give you about 2 assists per game as well. For Chris Austin, he has had a grand total of 24 points in the last 4 games, with 16 of them coming against the non-Division I team in Willamette. So in his last 3 games against D1 competition, he has scored 8 points, That's a big giant issue for this team because that means that you need to get quite a bit more out of Vasile Vucanovic, who comes over from Montenegro. He's been able to give you about 6 points, 5 rebounds per game. And then Vusan Masic, the transfer from Maine, he's been able to shoot about 45% from three. But again, not really sustainable. Got a pair of teams that they don't necessarily rip the ball away, but both of these teams have been quite inefficient in terms of taking care of the ball. And I do think that Wyoming is the best player out on the floor in Griffin. So I did set my total at 145.5. I think things get sloppy. I'm taking a look at the under. And with Wyoming getting 2 or more, going to be willing to take the points with them. 881, 882 on the betting board. Cal State Fullerton plays host to North Dakota. North Dakota is a 4.5 to a 5-point underdog with your total between 140.5 and 141.5. And with Fullerton, I did set them as a favorite of 6.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number for Fullerton. They did go through quite a few moving parts from a season ago, but I do think that they still have enough to be able to take down a North Dakota team that, very surprisingly, they have gotten off to a 6-1 start. Granted, it's been against a few non-D1 teams. Eastern Michigan, they needed overtime to knock off New Orleans. They go on the road, they knock off Pacific, but Pacific stinks. So do have your question marks there with this North Dakota team. It's been all about what you've been able to get out of your main two. BJ Omada has been able to give you 17+ points per game, and then Trayson Eaglestaff, how about 16 points and 2.5 assists out of him? Omad is able to chip in their 5 boards, but it is a North Dakota team that is currently shooting 27% from 3-point range. We had one guy be able to give you north of 5.5 rebounds per game, Omar Kilajovic. He has come in, he's been able to give the team right around 8 rebounds per game, but the team is a little bit rudderless with the way that they're doling out the ball. Eli King has only been able to give you about 2.5 assists per game after transferring in from Iowa State. Meanwhile, for this Fullerton team, Dominic Bruton, the transfer from Alcorn State, he's made a nice impact on this offense. He doesn't shoot it well from 3, but he does everything else well. He gives you multiple steals per contest. He doles out the ball with 3.5 assists per game, 4.5 boards. He gives you 12 points. You are going to need more outside shooting for this Fullerton team as they've been shooting about 28.5% from 3, but Max Jones, I do think, is the best scorer in this game, 18.5 points. He was a double-figure scorer a season ago. He's gotten a little bit better on the defensive end, and I do think that you get more down low out of Vincent Lee moving forward. Lee has been in the system for a very long time. Like, there was a time where he was more of a 10.6 rebound per game scorer. He, 2 seasons ago, had a little bit of a drop-off in his playing time, and from there he just really hasn't been able to refine it, but I do think that he is going to be able to do so this season. This is a Fullerton team that they're pretty much going with 10 separate guys, giving you at least 10 or so minutes per game, especially Grayson Carper, who's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. I do think that Fullerton is going to be able to do a better job on the glass, and this is a North Dakota team that is just not dialing it up from 3-point range. That's really been the Achilles heel of Fullerton thus far this season, so I think that this is just in general a bad matchup for North Dakota. I'm going to be willing to lay it with a Fullerton team that's looking to play quite a bit more up-tempo this season, and for North Dakota, thus far the defense has looked better than it has in past seasons. That said, if you look at the competition that they have played, it's been absolutely awful, and you've got a Fullerton team that's been getting cooked on defense recently themselves, as they've given up 72+ points in all but one of their games against C1 competition. So did somebody total 150.5, diving in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with Fullerton. 883, 884 on the betting board. BYU plays host to Fresno State. Fresno State is an underdog of 14 to 15 points, and your total is anywhere between 143.5 and 144. I set BYU as a favorite of 17 points. Going to be willing to lay this number with both of these teams. I do think we're going to see a little bit of a fall off from 3-point range as both of these teams have been absolutely unconscious. Got a Fresno State team that was one of the worst teams in all of college basketball from 3-point range a season ago. They're now shooting about 34.5% from 3-point range. We've seen Xavier Dussel, after he was shooting like 50% from 3 to begin the season, take a little bit of a fall off, but still has been able to give you 10 points per game. Has been solid coming in from Wyoming, but the big key is for Fresno State, they've got to win the battle on the glass. You've got Emmanuel Boyke along with Eduardo Andre 3000 being able to combine for about 14.5 rebounds per game. They're not necessarily supreme scorers, but they do a solid job down low. And then Isaiah Hill, while he's been able to give out 6.3 assists per game, it's been the turnovers that have really been costly for him, nearly 3 per contest. And as a whole, Fresno State, 15.3 turnovers per game. Last year, BYU had their turnover woes, and granted, it hasn't been necessarily the world's greatest competition that BYU has played against, but they've really cut down on those with about 11.7 per game, and right now BYU is shooting 38.5% from 3-point range. Jackson Robinson, Noah Waterman, these are guys with great versatility. Both are north of 6'7". Both are combined to shoot north of 42% from 3-point range, and Waterman, so they will give you about 7 rebounds per game. I was mentioning that Fresno State needs to win the battle down low against Fusani Trayer. I just don't think that that's going to be the case. He's got versatility, but he still does a good job hammering the glass with about 5.5 rebounds per game. And then Spencer Johnson. He's not necessarily a primary scorer with about 11 points per game, but he just does it all 5.5 boards, 5.5 assists. He's going to shoot better from three-point range as well. Currently is shooting 29% from three-point range. A season ago, shot 46% from three-point range. And then you've got a nice rim protector and Atiki Ali Atiki. He's 6'10". He gives you 5 boards. Doesn't necessarily give you a lot of scoring, but BYU's right now checking all the boxes. Are in the top 25 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. This team has been able to get to at least 77 points in each of their last 4 games, all while giving up 65 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5. You got a Fresno State team that's really starting to take a dive in regards to their offense. They did have that overtime game against New Mexico State, or else they'd be staring at in 4 out of their last 5 games, scoring 70 points or fewer. So I do think that's a good old situation of something he's got to give, but I do think that this is going to be some BYU domination. I do think that BYU could say Fresno State team has had a little bit of a tough time guarding from the perimeter. So I did set my total at 145, looking at the over, and with BYU 1 to lay up to 16.5 with them, 885, 886 on the betting board. UC San Diego is playing host to San Diego State. San Diego State is a favorite of 14 points, and your total is anywhere between 142 and 143.5. Did set my total 139.5. I think San Diego State is going to start to throttle down a little bit more with regards to their tempo. I feel like we have seen that in their last few games. They get pushed to overtime against Cal, a game in which they gave up just 67 points, and then against Old Point Loma, D2 University, they did a really nice job on defense there, giving up just 51 points, and that's just the way that San Diego State needs to operate. I know that it's fun to be able to score a bunch of points, but I think that they've tried it the last 2 non-conference slates, and they get into a lot of trouble when they do play these high-scoring, up-tempo games. Meanwhile, you've got a UC San Diego team that they themselves just really not putting the ball in the basket for UC San Diego. They've been able to break the 70-point plateau against 2 Division I teams, and one of those games was against Denver, who really doesn't play any defense whatsoever. Now, I will say with UC San Diego, Bryce Pope is a nice go-to scorer. 19 points per game, shooting 37.5% from three-point range, and now you're getting back in the fold Emmanuel Shaminga, and that is big. He missed the first 5 or 6 games of the season. Last season, he was able to give the team 7+ boards per contest coming in from UC Irvine. That offers a lot of support down low because they do have some nice versatility. You've got Francis Nwoke, who's been able to give you about 4 boards, shoots in the low to mid-30s from three-point range. J-Ron Brooks is finally healthy after he began his career out there for our pair of Pac-12 teams, and Washington and USC. So thus far, been a little bit of a disappointment, giving you only about 6.5 points per contest. And then you take a look at what you're able to get on the flip side for the San Diego State team. Right now, you've got one of the top scorers in all of college basketball, and Jaden Ledee. How about a double-double for him? 24 points, 10.5 boards. He's able to pop threes at 6'9". That's not necessarily his forte, but he's been coming along as a defensive stopper as well. Reese Dixon-Waters has been really the main scorer in the backcourt, as you still have Micah Parrish, Lamont Butler, Darion Trammell from a season ago, and how silent Darion Trammell has been striking as well. He missed a game earlier in the season, and I'm starting to think he's not 100%. He's averaging 6 points and 3.5 assists per game this season. He's still been fine on defense, but I do think that there might be a little bit of something wrong with him as of right now. You've got Micah Parrish as well, who's a very good three-point shooter, but all in all for the San Diego State team, they shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. They're just not a supremely offensive team. I do think that they're realizing that getting back to basics, slowing down is what's best for them, and they're going up against a San Diego team that is a pretty mid-tempo team. So I did set my total 139.5. I think that San Diego State is getting back to their roots. I do think that this 14 number is just a little bit too high because I do think that Emmanuel Shaminga coming back to the fold is big for this UC San Diego team. So it is a spot where I did set my line at a 13.5, 14 or more, willing to take the points with UC San Diego, and diving in on the under. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games, 887, 888. This is a neutral court game between Boise State and St. Mary's. So it's being played out there in the great state of Idaho for Boise State. They're a 3.5 to 4-point underdog with your total between 130.5 and 131. I set St. Mary's as just a 1.5 point favorite. I am going to be willing to take the points with Boise State. Like I said, they are playing this as what is, and I air quotes here, a neutral court game, but they're playing in their home state. There are going to be a lot of Boise State fans who are going to be in the stands, and both of these teams have just been disappointing to this point. You've got a Boise State team that's looking to life without Marcus Shaver. He was the main facilitator a season ago, really didn't light it up from three-point range, but made so many impact plays for this team. And then for St. Mary's, they lost a few ancillary pieces from the season ago, but this offense has just been broken. Now, the good news for St. Mary's is they have been able to get to the 70-point plateau in each of their last 2 games, but it's the St. Mary's bunch that overall this season, they're shooting 31% from three. They had their free throw issues last season, and this year that's very prevalent. They're shooting 65.5% at the free throw line, with 3 out of their top 4 scorers shooting 66.7% or worse now. With the St. Mary's team, they're also still doing a good job on the glass. Mitchell Saxon has been able to give you about 9 boards, 9.5 points per game, and then you get more like 6.5 rebounds and 9.5 points per game out of Joshua Jefferson. But other than Ada Mahaney, you don't have anyone else that's really giving you north of 15 points per contest. It's been touch and go, though you've been able to get out of Mason Forbes as well. You're looking for a little bit more in the backcourt as well out of Augustus Marasolinas, who in a small sample size last season was really able to do a nice job of generating some turnovers. Meanwhile, for Boise State, this is once again a bit of a top-heavy team that they're going to need Tyson Dagenhart to really go into takeover mode. 13 points, 5 boards as far this season while shooting under 30% from 3. They need him to really be able to kick it into high gear, and you just need a bit more out of Omar Stanley as well. I like him as a player, but I didn't feel like he was the world's greatest fit with the system at 6'8". He shot 45.5% last season at St. John's, but it was in a very small sample size. Thus far, he's shooting like 25% from three-point range. The higher usage has clearly been affecting him a little bit, and the biggest thing for this Boise State team is you really don't have a point guard right now. The only guy that's giving you north of 2 assists per game is 6'9" Cam Martin, who he's been solid as a do-it-all sort of player. 8.5 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest, so it's not like he's doing a bad job by any stretch of the imagination, and it almost feels like what you were getting about 2 or 3 years ago. I remember 2 to 3 years ago, they had a guy that just went in there. He did everything very, very well for the team, and Melody Armis. He's sort of looking like him as of right now, but I do think that for this Boise State team, they hold in there against the St. Mary's team that has really scuffled on offense. Boise State is scuffling on offense as well. These are 2 very slow tempo teams. They're going to be playing on a neutral court. This is from the Mountain America Center. That's in Idaho Falls, Idaho. So I do think that you get a slog in this game, and I made St. Mary's a very, very slight favorite of 1.5 points. So getting north of 3, taking the points with Boise State in their home state. Semi-total 127.5. So also diving in on the under, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-609, 306-610. Bethune-Cookman is going to be playing us Incarnate Word. The Word finds themselves as a 1.5 point favorite, and your totals between 148.5 and 149. I set Bethune-Cookman as a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take Bethune-Cookman outright on the money line. I actually like what I've seen of this Bethune-Cookman team, and what I really like about this team is Zion Harmon. Harmon is a former top 200 recruit that has really become a nice go-to scorer for the team, as he's been able to chuck in there about 15 plus points per contest, and they've got a guy in Damani McIntyre that literally has more steals than he's got points this far this season. I can't remember the last time I've ever seen anything quite like it, but I mean, all he does is come up with turnovers. This guy thus far this season has been able to give you about 3.5 points, 3.5 boards, and 3.5 steals per game, while shooting 36% from three-point range, might I add. So that's been very intriguing, and with Zion Harmon, he now has a little bit more help out there in the backcourt. Jacoby Heedy, he's been able to come in and has been a nice 6'6" combo player that's been shooting about 36% from 3, 14 points per contest. This is a Cookman team as a whole is only shooting about 30.5% from 3, and they're going to be had down low. You've got nobody that's really giving you north of 5.5 rebounds per game, but you're now getting back Derek Carter Hollinger, someone who 2 seasons ago at Montana, he was shooting like 44% from 3 as a 6'6", a little bit of a combo player. Incarnate Word, they're going to have the most versatile player in this game. That'll be Sky Wicks. He has been amazing, 20 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists. Began his career at Missouri State, went down to the non-D1 ranks, has resurfaced and has been absolutely awesome, but where are you going to be able to get outside of him is the question. And right now you've got Sean Robinson making some nice contributions after he was at Austin Peay last season, where he shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, logged about 10 points, 4 boards per contest, but this is a top-heavy team that doesn't have anyone outside that giving you really north of 4.3 rebounds per game. And for Incarnate Word, much like Bethune-Cookman, turnover issues, 15 turnovers per contest. You don't have either of these teams really playing a lick of defense as of right now for our good friends Incarnate Word in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is a team that's clocking in about 265th. For Bethune-Cookman, it's 235th, but with Cookman, they do a much better job of being able to generate turnovers. I think that is going to be the key. Incarnate Word as the better overall player in terms of the raw stats and Sky Wicks, but I do think that Harmon does a better job of leading his team and leads them to a victory. So, going to be taking a look at Bethune-Cookman outright on the money line, set them as a 3-point favorite. I do think that this is going to be a sloppier game involving a pair of teams that don't really shoot it well from three. So I did set my total 145. Diving in on the under and going to be taking a look at Cookman outright on the money line. 3-6-6-11, 3-6-6-12. VCU plays host at Norfolk State. Norfolk State is anywhere between a 12.5 to a 13-point underdog, and your total is anywhere between 136 to 137.5. As VCU as a 10-point favorite, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Norfolk State. This team needs to get back to basics with their defense because that's what really led them to the NCAA tournament in recent years. And for Norfolk State, I do think that they're doing that with bringing in the UNC Wilmington transfer and Jamari Thomas to lead the way. Right around 4 assists, 18 points per contest on 45% three-point shooting. Has been able to do up as well. The Norfolk State team at 7.5 steals per game. He's responsible for 2.5 of them, while Norfolk State also is keeping care of the ball with only about 11.5 turnovers per game. It's not a Norfolk State team that is really going to be running it and gunning it. Meanwhile, for VCU, I do think that they're going to be looking to crank up their tempo in the coming days and coming weeks as they got Ryan Odom that comes in from Utah State. And this just doesn't feel like Ryan Odom basketball with VCU being 305th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I was talking about Norfolk State wanting to be a little bit more of a controlled team. They're more around 245th in the country in terms of total possessions per game for Norfolk State. They don't really have a ton down low. They've got one guy that's giving you north of 4 rebounds per game and doesn't even have tremendous size, and Jelani Darden, who's right around 6'5", is able to give you about 7 rebounds per game. So that's going to be an edge for VCU, but it's not like they do an amazing job down low either. You've got Zeb Jackson, who's been able to give you 5.5 boards per contest, along to Blake Lovell, who comes over from England. Really past that, you don't have anyone else that's really been able to give you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. It's a VCU team that's turning the ball over 15 times per game as they're having to look to Max Shulga to do it all. Max Shulga is an amazing player. 5 boards, right around 4.5 assists, 16.5 points per game on 40% three-point shooting, but he just needs a little bit more help, especially in the front court. The team doesn't generate steals the way that they did under Mike Rhodes as well, and I do think that for Norfolk State, they're going to be able to win that turnover battle, which will keep them very lively in this game against a VCU team that they've been struggling quite a bit with their offense, scoring 64 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Norfolk State team that they've been having a little bit of a tough time on offense as they have scored fewer than 70 in 4 out of their last 5 games as well. But I do think that both of these teams are going to be able to get it going just a little bit more. I think that VCU is looking to crank up that tempo, so I did set my total at a 140, looking at the over. And with Norfolk State, anything north of 10, I'm going to be taking a look at the points. 3-6-6-13, 3-6-6-14. We've got Brown, and what can Brown do for you? Well, if they win by north of 3 points against Bryant, they might be able to make you money. Brown is between a 3 and 4 point favorite at home against Bryant, and your total is anywhere between 147 and 147.5. Except Brown is a 3-point favorite. Seeing 3.5s and 4s pop up, I am going to be willing to take the points with Bryant. Bryant certainly got a bit fortunate when they played against Florida Atlantic. That Florida Atlantic could not hit a shot to save their lives, but this is a legitimately good Bryant team that has been playing much slower under Phil Martelli Jr. They've got that featured guy in Sharif Gross-Bullock, 19.6 boards, 3 assists, shooting 40% from 3-point range, and Rafael Pinzon, who comes over from St. John's, he's shooting north of 40% from distance as well. And what I like about this team as well, they're featuring more guys as well. Under Jared Grosso, they were going with like a 7-man rotation, even though they brought in like a billion guys via the transfer portal. Now they've got 8 different guys logging at least 11 minutes per contest, 7 different guys giving you at least 16 minutes per game. And I think that that's for the best for this team, especially with what you're now able to get down low out of someone like a Daniel Rivera, who's been able to give you 7 rebounds per game. Earl Timberlake is bringing Sexy back with 12 points, 9 boards, 5 assists. He has been a nice stat sheet stuffer. And they go up against a Brown team that, if you look at the metrics, they've been one of the more unlucky teams in all of college basketball. You've got a pair of guys down low, Nana Owusu Anane along with Khalil Anya, who have been able to combine for about 14.5 rebounds per game. But for this Brown team, last year they were more of a mid-tempo team, really got after it on defense. They've sped up to not the good of themselves. This is a Brown team that they are now in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game, and I think it's for the worse. You've had Keno Lilly Jr. be a nice scorer with 20 points per game. Last year shot 39.9% from 3. That's down to about 34.5% from 3. And with them cranking up the tempo, I just feel like they're less efficient on the defensive end. They're less efficient on the offensive end. And I do think that Brown is looking themselves in the mirror, and they're saying that. I think that for Bryant, they're going to continue to play a little bit more slowly than they did under Mr. Grasso, which is going to keep the scoring under control. I do think that Brown is going to be able to lock down a little bit more with their defense, but I do think that Bryant holds in there, and I do think that Brown, in a little bit of a nip and tuck game, they get the job done at home, but not by margin. Set my line at 3, so getting forward, taking the points with Bryant, and with my total set it at a 143, so also looking at the under. The final game in Hampton versus Maryland Eastern Shore got canceled, so this is going to be the last game. 306-6-15, 306-6-16. LSU is going to be playing us to Southeast Louisiana. By the way, Hampton, Maryland Eastern Shore postponed, not canceled, so just want to make that distinction. But that said, with Southeast Louisiana, they're a 14-point underdog with your total anywhere between 145.5 and 147.5. With LSU, made them a 15-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 14 with them. For Southeast Louisiana, this team has been catching my eye a little bit, and I do think that they are real contenders out there in the Southland along with McNeese, but you got a Southeast Louisiana team that I think that they're going to have a tough time dealing with the 7-foot size of Will Baker. Will Baker has all sorts of versatility, 14.5 points, right around 5.5 to 6 boards. He's able to pop threes. Sometimes can be a little bit of a defensive liability, and for this LSU team, the biggest key for them, they need to find a way to take better care of the ball. The 14 turnovers per game has been a little bit unsightly for LSU. They were really relying upon the Tulane transfer, who actually began his career over at LSU, and Jalen Cook to run the show. He has been ineligible, so Trey Hannibal, Jordan Wright, these have been guys that have really had to run the show, and that's been a little bit of an issue. You just have not been able to get a lot out of Jamion Collins as well. Collins began his career over at Kentucky, where he was a top 50 recruit. He's come in, and he's laid a turd thus far with about 5 points per game, but with the Southeast Louisiana team, they just don't have a lot down low. You've been able to have Roger McFarland be a 6'5", Mr. Do-It-All, Swiss Army knife guy, 6 boards, 15 points per game, shooting 38% from 3-point range, and then you've got Brody Woodbury, who down low is able to give you about 5 rebounds per game, but this Southeast Louisiana team, they do turn the ball over a little bit as well with 13.5 turnovers per game. I do like Roscoe Eastmond as a primary ball handler for this team, right around 4.5 assists per game. He makes some good, solid plays, and Alec Woodyard is able to shoot 40% from 3-point range, but LSU, even though they are a little bit of a liable team with regards to outside 3-point shooting defense, they are a team that I think is going to be able to light it up a little bit more on offense. They just had Murphy's Law hit them in that game against Syracuse, where they could not hit water if they fell out of a boat. They went 2 of 22 from 3-point range, just an outlier shooting night for them, and I do expect a little bit more moving forward out of Carlos Stewart, who's only been able to give you 5 points per game. Last year at Santa Clara, he had 15 points per game, shot north of 40% from 3-point range. I think that he's going to be in a little bit more rhythm. I feel like an LSU team that they had to adjust a little bit on the fly with Cook being out of the fold. I do think that they're going to take it to a Southeast Louisiana team that just can't match up with the athleticism. So I did set my line at 15. I'm going to be willing to lay it. I think that things get cranked up tempo a little bit more against a Southeast Louisiana team that is well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So set my total 147 here at the 145.5, looking over and willing to lay up to 14.5 with LSU, and that'll wrap things up for the Friday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_E1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean doesn't matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast. Big thanks to Blake Lovell for joining me in segment number 2 as well. But coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, which means I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.